Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 851: The Monster is Coming. Soon, a little over an hour later, the entire Northwest Basin really did, as Liang Yue had said, experience a rare tornado. The wind was very strong, like a giant vacuum cleaner, carrying massive amounts of sand and dust that directly dyed the high sky yellow. It was unknown what principle it followed, but after forming, it began to move eastward in a mighty manner wherever it passed. All the towns and villages along the way suffered. Fortunately, the tornado's moving speed was fast enough, almost in a straight line, and it didn't linger on the way, so the losses were acceptable. Finally, it crossed a large area of wasteland and headed directly towards Liang Yue's small town farm from Xiaowu's panoramic sand table. It could be seen that in the later stages, the amount of dust and sand rolled up by the tornado was too large and heavy, completely covering its main body. It even slowed down its own rotation speed. Later, the whirlwind almost disappeared, and soon transitioned and transformed into a raging sandstorm. Sand and dust filled the sky, vast and mighty, blocking the sky for hundreds of kilometers along the way, overwhelming the sky and covering the earth, like doomsday clouds. But soon, when this wave of sandstorms approached the area within 100 kilometers radius around the small town farm, it unexpectedly weakened rapidly. The intensity of its decline could almost be described as immediate. Looking at it from the sand table, the front line of the sandstorm entered a certain range, and the dust settled at a speed visible to the naked eye, flying from the high sky to the ground. The situation was as if someone had poured a basin of dust and sand from the high sky, quickly piling up a continuous dune on the originally empty desert. The amount of sand and the strong wind also instantly dropped from covering the sky to the normal range of sand and dust, and the wind force carrying the dust and sand also dropped geometrically. After this situation appeared, the sandstorm barely moved forward for another 2 or 3 kilometers, and then completely turned into a small breeze according to Xiaowu's relevant data calculation on the sand table. After the wind force stabilized, it had been directly pressed to level 5, and almost no dust or sand could be seen in the air. It's really amazing, watching a serious sandstorm being resolved so lightly, without a trace of fireworks. Liang Yue couldn't help but sigh at this time. If Yanjing had this kind of good thing back then, it wouldn't have had to feel ashamed and rise up later, directly destroying the nearby desert. What is this book of yours? It looks like a comic strip summoning codex, a special treasure from another world. As he spoke, Liang Yue gently raised the codex in his hand with a flash of colorful light. A chubby, fat, black and white panda appeared on the stone table in front of him. This was the exclusive life battle beast that the summoning codex had given him, the light and dark Saint Bear, which ranked among the divine beast level bloodlines. At this time, this little guy was sitting with his legs crossed, holding a carrot as big as a bone in his arms and gnawing on it. Suddenly seeing the surrounding environment change, he subconsciously widened his bare eyes, opened his mouth wide, and looked around with 2 big dark circles under his eyes. His round eyes full of curiosity. Guardian battle beast, unnamed, a contradictory combination of 2 extreme attributes. A rare species in the heavens and worlds bloodline, light and dark Saint Bear level 1 rank, divine beast, juvenile, talent abilities, elemental body, golden marrow jade bone, super strength, super agility, armor breaking, magic breaking, intelligence, combat skills, light magic proficiency, dark magic proficiency, fusion magic, energy ball, energy shield, palm strike, scratch, bite. You actually raise pandas. This thing is not comparable to those macaws. Looking at the light and dark Saint Bear that suddenly appeared in front of her, Liang Yue's eyes lit up, but in the blink of an eye, she looked at Liang Yue with a teasing look. Obviously, this woman regarded his exclusive life battle beast as an ordinary panda, but it's no wonder she did so. After all, this little guy looks too much like a panda except for the slightly glowing fur and the particularly bright dark eyes. There is almost no difference from the national treasure. Moreover, standing under the big sun, it is impossible to tell whether it is glowing or reflecting light. I have raised many pandas in other worlds, but this one is different. As he spoke, Liang Yue reached out and hugged the little guy in his arms, stroked its soft fur, and said, "From now on, you will be called D. Done done, let's go. I'll take you around looking at you. One would think this is the first time you've seen it. Meng Xiaoyu followed closely behind Liang Yue, watching the little chubby guy who was leaning in someone's arms, eating carrots and curiously looking around. She couldn't help but reach out and pinch one of the half-grown panda's round ears. It's indeed the first time I've seen it, and this thing is not a giant panda. It just looks similar. Not a panda? Summoning Codex. Are you saying that this thing is a summoned beast? Something like that. Saying it was a summoned beast was not entirely correct according to the information conveyed by the Codex when he dripped blood to recognize the master. This light and dark Saint Bear is actually a specific manifestation of the special rule system on the Codex, combined with a certain rule contained in Liang Yue, the contractor. It is a part of Liang Yue's body, but not entirely. After completing the contract with the summoning Codex, each contractor will be given a different exclusive life battle beast. Some are demon beasts, some are birds, some are underworld creatures, some are mechanical creatures, and some are special types. The types are complex, and most are related to the contractor's own characteristics, bloodline, and even personality. The Dundun in front of him is the product of the Codex rules combined with some of Liang Yue's own special features, so in terms of the relationship between each other, it is even closer than him and teacher Jinxiang. Monsters have appeared at this moment, just as Liang Yue was holding the half-grown fat Dundun in his arms, wandering in his own fruit and vegetable garden, tasting various fruits and vegetables. A loud report with a hint of excitement suddenly came from the alarm room specially set up in the small town farm due to the monster invasion. Liang Yue has temporarily defaulted to the fact that the domestic military personnel can use Xiao Wu's sand table 24 hours a day to monitor the space channel on the Pacific seabed in real time. Moreover, in order to facilitate the work and rest of this group of station officers and soldiers and enrich everyone's daily life, Liang Yue also asked Xiao Wu to help build a special dormitory building, as well as various leisure rooms, basketball courts, badminton courts, swimming pools, screening halls, and other facilities. In return, these soldiers usually help Liang Yue's small town farm with some harvesting, planting, grazing, milking, and even patrolling work. They are usually hardworking and willing to do anything, never complaining, and are very useful. So recently, Liang Yue has also been thinking about whether to give these officers and soldiers some subsidies or something. Of course, monsters do not appear every day. For example, this time, there was a gap of nearly 2 months between this and the previous days when monsters crossed the space gate and broke into the seabed. However, these professional soldiers on duty have been using the panoramic sand table 24 hours a day without interruption. Therefore, during this period, whether they will take the opportunity to observe the people of other countries and their various lifestyles with the convenience of this sand table is hard to say. Liang Yue doesn't bother to care. Chapter 852 Mecha Concept. Approximately 3 hours later, the monsters successfully landed in Sydney, Australia. During the journey, they mostly ignored the small island nations they passed, showing no interest whatsoever. Even when they encountered islands or land, they simply went around them. As they approached Australia, they purposefully submerged and followed the coastline of the Great Australian Bight until they reached the southeastern coastal region of the country. Only then, upon seeing the bustling metropolis, did they choose to come ashore and wreak havoc. Such a strategy clearly indicates one thing, that is, compared to the exploratory cruises of the previous 2 monster invasions, this third round, with 3 monsters arriving together, seems to be mainly for the purpose of destruction. As a result, Sydney, a famous metropolis in the South Pacific, was truly unlucky. This time in broad daylight, the 300-meter-tall monsters began to work together, landing on the coast next to the city's iconic opera house. Roaring, they rampaged and charged into the city's interior. Giant claws, long tails, roars, and swaying bodies caused top-tier buildings of all kinds to crumble like paper under these seemingly primitive attacks. Their demolition efficiency was truly astonishing. Fortunately, the Australian side was well prepared. Not only did they have the American Father's Army stationed within the borders, but they also possessed the real-time sandbox map that Liang Yue had temporarily shared through the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu. Of course, this sharing was only with Stark's intelligent butler, Jarvis, who then indirectly conveyed the information to the American military and SHIELD. In any case, when they learned that 3 monsters would be landing in their own city to cause destruction, they took action almost immediately. Furthermore, based on the monsters' wandering direction, they urgently evacuated nearly half of Sydney's local population. All combat forces were quickly assembled, with the Army, Navy, and Air Force fully deployed. Even the two spaceships that the United States and Britain had been using for experimental projects in the solar system were forced to abandon their original mission plans and quickly arrived over Australia. It seems that as members of the Five Eyes Alliance, they truly care about the lives and deaths of their own people. In addition, it is said that the member countries of the Five Eyes Alliance seem to have reached a secret scientific research cooperation agreement. Specifically, it concerns a collaborative project on a research laboratory on Xander. The parties agreed that as long as people from the Five Eyes countries can obtain tourist quotas and successfully land on Xander, their scientific research cooperation agreement will take effect immediately compared to verbal agreements with other countries in the world. This kind of relationship based on racial identity, an alliance within the Anglo-Saxon race, is obviously much closer. This relationship is also reflected in the current monster invasion event. Almost within half an hour after Liang Yue passed the information to Stark, the major American military bases stationed in Australia completed their assembly. They began to quickly mobilize combat forces, pursuing the monsters from land and air. The American military had apparently rehearsed similar situations before. So some secret weapons that were originally only stored on the mainland were now being transported to Australia. Therefore, in the face of the monsters wreaking havoc in downtown Sydney, the Five Eyes coalition was not entirely without a means of retaliation. The process was roughly as follows. The United States and Britain first used the two spaceships Liang Yue had leased to them to quickly transfer two of the monsters to the desert region in the Australian outback using tractor beams from high altitude. The remaining one, after a period of destruction, was temporarily frozen in the city by the American military's freeze ray. A few minutes later, after the spaceships finished transporting the monsters, they turned around and made another trip, dropping the third one in the desert as well. Then, awaiting these three monsters were various experimental weapons and saturated ammunition stockpiles from the human coalition. The outcome was predictable, but some damage was inevitable during the process. In addition, the repeated monster invasion incidents over the past few months have once again sparked widespread discussion in the world's online sphere, with various arguments being made. However, most people are only vaguely aware of the situation, and have not even figured out the origin of these monsters, believing that they are truly motivated by bizarre reasons similar to those in certain cartoons. That humanity's wanton destruction of the Earth's ecological environment has triggered the dissatisfaction of Mother Earth, who has deliberately released these monsters to destroy human industrialized civilization. These monsters themselves are also attributed to a self-protection mechanism of the Earth. A self-defense means similar to white blood cells clearing bacteria. People with slightly clearer minds mostly focus their discussions on how countries should respond to the subsequent monster offensives, what kind of strategy should be established, and what means and weapons should be used to effectively eliminate these biological weapons. The domestic side also obviously attaches great importance to this issue, regardless of the heated discussions among various civilians and opinion leaders in the online world. After the battle situation in Australia had settled, and the three monsters had been submerged by massive amounts of ammunition and firepower, the officers and soldiers in the small city farm also used the monster invasion event as an opportunity to launch a post-war summary and internal opinion discussion meeting on the spot while watching the real-time images on the panoramic sandbox. They summarized the experience of the monster biological weapon invasion process and tried to propose some of their own solutions in comparison. Meng Xiaolui was more direct, turning her head and asking Liang Yue for his opinion on the matter. I think the Transformers combat mode is good. Transformers? But in fact, although they are a mechanical race, the entire technology tree within the race has almost been locked. In addition, their homeland has been destroyed. They have almost lost the possibility of establishing related scientific research laboratories, and even Optimus Prime, as the leader, does not have any decent offensive weapons in his hands. Are you going to have him go up and slash at the monsters with those few high-heat melee weapons? You think it won't work just because the technology level is not high enough? Thinking of this, Meng Xiaolui suddenly had an idea, raising her eyebrows and looking at Liang Yue as she continued. You mean we build matches? With the technology of the arc reactor, there are no more problems in terms of energy drive, but the matching weapons. Do you have any ready-made mech samples here? Yes, but I don't want to take them out. Liang Yue heard this, glanced at her, and said, why? Let them figure out their own solutions. Chapter 853 Influx. Soon, another half-month had passed. On this day, an unexpected rain suddenly descended on the periphery of the small town's farm, which was definitely a rare occurrence in Lopner, a desert area. According to Xiao Wu's weather forecast, the rainfall seemed to be quite significant, reaching the late stage of moderate rain, almost reaching the standard line for heavy rain for an entire day. The sky was covered with thick clouds, and a large amount of rain poured down on the earth, covering an area of more than 100 kilometers centered on the small town. However, unlike the usual desert landscape, the entire northwestern part of the Lautner lakebed was now covered with patches of green vegetation. Yes, under the attraction of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, although the state basically does not allow individuals to contract land around the small town, the official actions are exceptionally rapid. Even more so, it has a higher priority than the infrastructure construction of the entire Northwest Basin in less than a month. With the help of the dozens of dense river networks created by Liang Yue, a complete set of drip irrigation, electricity, network, and transportation systems had been quickly built. Then, under the guidance and planning of a group of professionals, various farms, medicinal fields, orchards, and even tea gardens were quickly created among them. Meng Xiao's oilseed orchard area was the most conspicuous. In just over 2 months, this batch of tree species from alien planets had grown into hundreds of thousands of robust plants, as tall as 5 meters. The slender leaves, like pine needles, beautifully coiled on the branches, all green at the forks of the main trunk, strings of red, round fruits, somewhat like longan, were hanging there with the help of the water source from Liang Yu's farm, and the continuous nourishment of the trace amount of azure tree liquid mixed in it. These oil plants have now all fruited, and a large part of them have already matured just a week ago. Meng Xiao had just urgently built a small factory near the northern hills of her land and ordered a batch of oil pressing machines from the coastal areas. She harvested a small batch of ripe fruits from her plantation, pressed them into edible oil, and sent them back to professional institutions in Yanjing for testing. This fruit, with a large red shell and about the size of a 1 yuan coin, is like peanuts, olives, soybeans, sunflower seeds, and many other oil plants, which can be eaten separately, and the taste seems to be very good after being slightly dried. It can bake out a mellow and sweet aroma. A group of people from all over the world who came one after another and were about to embark on their second trip to Xander also caught up with a good time this time, and together with Liang Yue and others, personally tasted this fruit. The final conclusion was that the fruit tasted a bit like sunflower seeds. The texture was closer to peanuts, but the aroma also had a hint of red dates. Like other dried fruits, it is rich in nutrition and filling, but the oil content is relatively high, and while delicious, it should not be eaten too much every day. Subsequently, after tasting various dishes made with a pressed edible oil of this fruit, many wealthy people, dignitaries, and experts on the spot expressed their willingness to buy a batch from China at a high price, or they simply wanted to take the agency rights for this thing, or even obtain the right to plant and sell it in their own country. Unfortunately, Meng Xiao had already received a cooperation agreement from relevant parties a few days ago. Liang Yue roughly understood that some people in China seemed to want to divide this special oil plant into 2 parts, either roasted into dried fruit for consumption, or extracted into high-end edible oil. One part is used for the domestic self-use of certain groups of people. After all, Meng Xiao's land is next to Liang Yu's small town farm, with abundant spiritual energy. And even the water used for irrigation is mixed with special spiritual objects of heaven and earth. The benefits to the body are definitely not just the nutritional substances on paper. The other part is to be directly transported to Xander by Liang Yu's spacecraft as a high-end edible oil commodity for dedicated sale. The purpose, of course, is to earn star yuan foreign exchange in Xander, and then subsidize its own scientific research laboratory nearby. Now, the 3-month period has arrived as the departure time of the trip approaches. Liang Yu's originally quiet small-town farm has become increasingly lively in recent days. Obviously, this group of people who have painstakingly obtained a travel quota this time did not come empty-handed, nor did they come alone. They all brought a lot of luggage. Some were gifts for Liang Yue, the host, and some were bilateral cooperation agreements with China's favorable terms, but most of them were actually goods they were going to take to Xander. Most of these goods are local specialties from Earth, for example, such as macaws, desert foxes, small pet monkeys, smooth-haired minks, and various docile and lovely cats, dogs, etc. Such special pets. In addition, there seems to be a relatively special traveler in this traveler team according to the list compiled by the intelligent brain Xiao Wu in the final stage of this period. The owner of this quota is actually from the kingdom of Wakanda in eastern Africa. It is said that facing such a tribal kingdom that has always been in a closed, primitive, backward, and ignorant area in the impression of the people of the world after confirming that this country had obtained a travel quota from the previous lottery, many people, many forces, and even national forces, naturally reached out to them. Unfortunately, it didn't succeed in the end this time. Representing the Wakanda tribal kingdom is Princess Shuri, the daughter of the current king of the country, who is also Black Panther's sister in the plot, a young, talented female scientist at the same time. She is also a very active and cheerful little girl, who became friends with Yuna, Tina and others shortly after arriving at the farm in her luggage. Liang Yue found a specialty from the kingdom of Wakanda, 5 large syringe-shaped containers, inside which were filled with a liquid metal somewhat like mercury. I think it should be the famous vibranium. Soon, on the day of the scheduled departure, Stark and Pepper arrived on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Quinjet, and with them were Natasha and Liang Yue's former neighbor, the good old man Phil Coulson. Like the last trip, these people were not lucky enough to get a travel quota in the previous lottery. They came to mooch a ride among them. Stark had already greeted Liang Yue and said that he would also go to Xander this time. And Pepper happened to be next to him at the time. Liang Yue then asked casually and told him that one person only had 1 million yuan of activity funds, and with Pepper it would be 2 million actually. Pepper didn't plan to go. After all, as the current president of Stark Industries, she has a lot of things to deal with every day, but she didn't expect that she was finally pulled over by Stark. In addition to this, Natasha and Coulson were purely here to mooch tickets. Maybe director Nick Fury also knew that Liang Yue didn't like him very much, but he was reluctant to give up such an opportunity to obtain alien technology. So in addition to Natasha, he sent someone's former neighbor in addition, on the domestic side. Meng Xiaoyu will naturally also go. Aunt Liu, who is obviously busy to death, but had to take time out of her busy schedule, also received a commission from the country this time and came to Liang Yue's small-town farm together. Chapter 854 Asgardians and Chapter X27, Childlike Innocent. However, after Liang Yue's warning, some people in China became much more cautious about the value of these quotas. They no longer acted as they had before, giving a symbolic amount, just going through the motions, as if they thought it was appropriate. They used to think that $10 million could directly buy 10 quotas at a bargain price. This time, they learned to respect the facts. With the value of quotas becoming increasingly tight, the significance of a ticket to Xander is no longer the previous price tag of $10 billion. The value of each quota is immeasurable, and the implied benefits are also very significant, of course, compared to the actual market demand and the huge benefits represented by these quotas. Many people actually do not want to see the price of these quotas being driven too high, except for a few individuals or small countries who choose to go all in, raising funds from various sources and spending huge sums of money in an attempt to gamble. Most countries that have obtained quotas are consciously and tacitly controlling the monetary value reflected by each quota. Simply throwing money at the problem is obviously not a smart approach. They are more focused on using political games, negotiations, coercion, manipulation, and other means to extract quotas from other individuals or vulnerable groups, especially those so-called major countries, for their own different purposes, are playing this trick with each other. However, even so, on the surface, the transaction price of each tourist quota to Xander has still been doubled and then reduced by half, reaching a price tag of $2.5 billion each. Moreover, it is bound to be available in name only. That prolonged rain, was it caused by your little climate instrument or something? The rain in front of them was not falling decisively. Apart from the slightly intense moderate rain on the first day, the weather around the small city had been gloomy and humid for the following week, with sparse rain. Although the subsequent rainfall was not heavy, it did carry some of the meaning of continuous autumn rain. Even when Liang Yue and his group boarded the Dolphin spaceship, carrying a full hold of complicated luggage, and set off for the universe, the area around the farm was still overcast and rainy. This is definitely abnormal for the Lopner region, which has long been dried up into a famous large desert. Even with Liang Yue deliberately creating several infinite water sources and dozens of rivers and streams of varying flow rates around the area for farm construction, it still cannot be explained. Therefore, while everyone arrived at the transfer station for this trip, which is the Asgardian outpost base at the wormhole exit, and was busy processing identity guarantee certificates, Meng Xiaoyu hugged Aunt Liu's arm and came to his side, asking about the details. The small-scale climate regulator's principle is to independently construct a climate system within a certain range without affecting the Earth's large-scale climate environment. It can effectively control the temperature, wind speed, evaporation, and even the air and water circulation system within the region. Xiaowu has not yet adjusted the evaporation rate around the farm. However, the water vapor formed daily is retained within this regional small cycle. Liang Yue didn't hide anything about this. After all, in the long and continuous scientific research and deduction in the past, the technological achievements summarized by the intelligent brain Xiaowu were too numerous to count, and this little thing was not rare. I remember you once said that the water sources you created can flow water infinitely. Now, even the water vapor in the small area cannot escape. Will there be more and more rainfall in the future? No wonder I feel that the humidity in your farm has increased significantly recently. At this rate, I'm afraid Lopner will be refilled soon. After hearing Liang Yue's words, Meng Xiao immediately began to imagine, and her eyes seemed to glow. If there is too much water vapor, I will adjust it later. The climate regulation standard I set for Xiao Wu before was based on the Jiangnan water town, and the rainfall will not exceed Suzhou and Hangzhou. What about winter? Can the climate regulator also maintain the temperature around the small city? Not a big problem, it just consumes a little electricity. One arc reactor can handle it. So powerful? Is that climate regulator of yours for sale? What, do you want to install it in the Northwest Basin? Yes. With this regulator, won't there be good weather every year in the future? That will be our country's major granary in the future, not for sale. Overcome the difficulties yourself. I've helped the country enough. HMPH. About half a day later, Liang Yue led everyone to set sail again, crossing a space channel and directly entering the galaxy where Xander is located. The reason why they were delayed for half a day at the Asgardian outpost base was naturally not because of the problem of processing any guarantee certificates. In fact, there were only more than 50 people on the entire Dolphin, plus some passengers who were going to Xander for the second time. It only took them more than half an hour to complete the process this time. The customs officers outside the planet were very polite to them. They almost just scanned them with an instrument across the screen, and after confirming the identities of the Earthlings, they were smoothly released. This is probably because Liang Yue's identity is already different. The spiritual tea in his hand had become a hot commodity among the locals of Xander and even the sovereign people when he left last time. Many wealthy people, authorities, and religious figures like to drink it. Of course, the most important thing is that drinking spiritual tea can purify the body and nourish the spirit, and it can also be used for cultivation through the spiritual substances in it, with twice the result with half the effort as a famous civilization in the Marvel Universe. Good things that can be popular between the two intergalactic countries of Xander and Sovereign are bound to attract attention. As soon as he landed, when Liang Yue led a group of travelers off the spaceship and took the Airbus to his own small, dilapidated building, which was now very different from what it used to be. The Xiao Wu Avatar left here reported to him the hot sales situation of the spiritual tea before leaving Xander last time. Liang Yue had left a lot of spiritual tea inventory in his small shop located on the prosperous commercial street in the city. As a result, according to Xiao Wu's Avatar, this batch of spiritual tea was snapped up by the wealthy people who came after hearing the news in just less than 3 days. You must know that the selling price of this batch of tea that he put in his magic shop is not cheap at all according to some agreement rules. Although the spiritual tea in Liang Yue's hand is not entirely monopolized by the two civilizations of Xander and Sovereign, in terms of selling price, it can only be sold more expensive than the price sold to these two civilizations, not cheaper. That is to say, the value of 1 gram of spiritual tea in the small shop is greater than 500,000 star coins, or sovereign gold coins at the same value exchange rate. In short, Liang Yue won big this time. Chapter 855 By a Planet to Play. However, the value of money ultimately lies in its purchasing power. In other words, only money that is spent can truly realize its value. If it's not spent and is just hoarded, it's just a pile of numbers, just like the astronomical amount of US dollars that the AI, Xiao Wu, helped him earn on the stock market back on Earth. The star coins and sovereign gold coins he has now are the same. Therefore, in order to prevent this money from becoming just another pile of numbers on paper, Liang Yue decided to invest it. It had only been 3 months since his last visit to Xander, but the little rundown building was now completely different. Welcomed by the scientists and observers stationed inside, the group stepped through the door. What greeted them was an exceptionally wide hall. The corridor from the entrance to the front desk alone was nearly 100 meters long. The walls on both sides of the corridor were covered with paintings of relics from various civilizations on Earth, as well as various wood and stone carvings. The interior decoration of the hall was elegant and generous, with gold and white as the main colors, but it also had a touch of natural ruggedness. The wall behind the front desk in the hall was a light gold transparent metal wall, inside which grew a huge ornamental tree, graceful and winding like a dragon, climbing straight to the top floor of the building. The surroundings were also dotted with various flowers, plants, and white-gray ornamental stones, with pavilions and lounge chairs for visitors to sit and rest, and several brightly colored butterflies flying among them. Clearly, the space inside the transparent wall was a garden. Moreover, with the expansion of Liang Yue's special divine power, the area of this garden was much wider than it appeared. Although the travelers this time were mostly high-ranking officials, knowledgeable, and well-informed people on Earth. The faces of each of them, as they stepped through the door at this moment, were filled with undisguised excitement. It was still the same standard procedure as the last trip. Liang Yue uniformly issued each tourist an activity fund of 100,000 star coins, a wristwatch computer, translator earphones, a personal virtual connection system, and provided free tea, meals, accommodation, and transportation daily. Of course, those who had close relationships with him, such as Aunt Liu, Meng Xiaoyu, Stark, Natasha, Guna, and even old neighbor Kelson, each received 1 million star coins. The luggage of these travelers was all sent by Xiaowu to the top of the small rundown building. At the atrium of the building, the dense branches at the top of the tree were like several huge umbrellas arranged in a scattered manner, covering 1/3 of the entire rooftop garden. Under the shade of the trees, this environment was very suitable for temporarily housing pets such as macaws, kittens, and puppies. As for how to sell these pets later, Xander had a very developed and complete network and virtual network sales system, with various commodities, gifts, pets, fresh food, meals, and other businesses. Perhaps it was because the previous batch of travelers saw this that the second round of travelers thought of coming to Xander to do this business. Frankly speaking, this logic was correct, but the problem was that the costs in this business, such as venue, management, operating permits, etc., were basically borne by Liang Yue. Xander was a highly developed star civilization in the universe, and if you wanted to do business here, you naturally had to abide by various procedures, laws, and regulations. Even if Liang Yue, considering the friendship with fellow Earthlings, did not charge them any venue rental fees, they would still have to handle some operating permits, pet vaccinations, and even subsequent tax work themselves. Fortunately, these chores were taken care of by the AI, Xiaowu, just like his own magic shop on the commercial street, which had always been managed by Xiaowu. Of course, it could not be ruled out that some ambitious people wanted to use the 100,000 star coin budget in their hands to open and operate their own shops outside. For example, the 2 master chefs from China who came before, currently operating a Chinese gourmet shop, had already successfully gained a foothold in the snack street in the city. According to Xiaowu, the 2 chefs' shops seemed to be doing very well, and they had already started making a profit in just 3 or 4 months. Xiaowu, search for the most recent auction, and the items must include life planets. Okay, master, generally speaking, auctioning the ownership of planets, especially those involving life planets, is definitely illegal on Xander. After all, as a developed civilization in the universe, some fig leaves on the surface should still be maintained, but nothing is absolute, and rules, to put it bluntly, are sometimes meant to be broken as long as there is demand and a market. There will definitely be people in this world who dare to do this business. The only difference is whether they can control the situation. The same is true for Xander at present. Although on the surface it is a developed, open, and free civilization, there are still many unspoken rules hidden in the dark. Liang Yue discovered this when he first arrived. There were many industries and transactions on Xander that were not allowed under the legal system, but were deeply rooted in the dark. For example, black markets, and various auctions of contraband, etc. It was just a pity that he didn't have much foundation at that time, and he didn't have the intention to engage in these things. You want to auction off a life planet, after distributing the activity funds, virtual connection tools, and other items to everyone. Most of the travelers had already gone to their rooms under the guidance of the simulation robots. There were also some scholars and scientists who were eager to connect with the scientific research laboratories established in this small rundown building by their own countries, but this did not include some returning customers, such as Guna, Tina, Murava, Natasha, and even Aunt Liu, who had nothing to do. They basically came to Xander to play. At most, they would spend some money here with the funds in their hands, and when they returned to the city, they would bring back some local specialties or new technologies to Earth, but they did not bear too many missions. That's right, just as this group of people was still in the hall, pointing and commenting on the garden in the middle of the building through the transparent metal wall. Meng Xiaoyu, who had been paying attention to Liang Yue's movements, suddenly overheard his plan through her passable hearing, so she came over directly. Well, those zeros on the books always have to find a place to go, otherwise they're just a pile of numbers. Looking at Meng Xiaoyu, who was walking quickly towards him with her eyes shining, and Aunt Liu and others who also paid attention after hearing her words, Liang Yue glanced at the girl and replied soon. In less than 10 seconds, the AI, Xiaowu, had searched for some relevant information online. Of course, auctions like this with contraband items would not be openly announced in the online world. It also involved a whole set of disguises, investigations, and issues such as qualifications and capital. which required a series of tests such as strict identity verification and financial assessment. Therefore, in order to successfully pass the assessment of the backstage staff of this auction, Liang Yue still had some work to do. For example, expressing his strong desire to buy, etc. for the assessment of Liang Yue's identity, personal assets, and financial strength. It was not a big problem after all. He was not a local of Xander, but came from a life planet within the sphere of influence of Asgard, and had recently brought people from his home planet to travel several times. Therefore, there was no need to worry about him being an undercover agent of some local official forces. In addition, Liang Yue's recent business was very big. Spiritual tea, a commodity with magical attributes, had become a star product on the market, and it was still the kind that was hard to come by. 500,000 star coins per gram was still the official purchase price. When it was Xander's turn to digest it internally, the price was even more ridiculously expensive, and ordinary people could not afford it at all. But there was no way. The more developed the civilization, the greater the gap between different classes and groups. In short, in terms of financial resources, there was naturally a guarantee. Therefore, it should not be very difficult for a high-quality customer like Liang Yue to obtain a qualification to enter a contraband auction. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 856, Tree of Life. Indeed, things unfolded as Liang Yue had anticipated. Over the next week, following Xiao Wu's guidance, he began a frantic spree of scanning, shopping, and acquiring on online trading platforms various plants, crops, industrial products, popular goods, some technological products that had been phased out by the Xandarians but were quite practical for civilizations with lower technological levels, and even production lines and factories became his targets. Whether on major official trading platforms or second-hand websites, his whirlwind figure could be seen everywhere. Tons of transaction shares, various scientific instruments, machines, and authorized plants flowed in like water, with truckload after truckload being transported to Liang Yue's dilapidated building by air freight. Then, without even a glance, these purchased items were directly thrown into the stronghold world by him. This kind of wild spending behavior, witnessed by a group of travelers who were meticulously calculating how to maximize the benefits of their activity funds, scouring various shopping recommendation lists from foreign low-level civilizations, and racking their brains to dig out a few items that could be connected with the national power behind them, left them all wide-eyed and hesitant. Finally, after reviewing the shopping list of the past few days, Liang Yue's spending had directly reached 9 figures. However, the effect produced by such extravagant behavior was also quite astonishing. In just the second day, this newly rich local tyrant who had come from an alien planet to squander wealth attracted the attention of certain individuals, and then an organization directly sent him an invitation to an auction. It was an electronic admission type, and the auction was also conducted in a virtual world, without offline services, but the entire process was endorsed by official institutions, and the items auctioned would be directly delivered by logistics companies after the event. This was certainly not the kind of admission ticket to a contraband auction that Liang Yue had been expecting. It was just an ordinary venue that hardly any local people would attend. The items auctioned were basically second-hand technology or bundled disposal products from phased-out production lines. However, they were basically bulk commodities or technological products that were not commonly seen on the market, and some of the auction items even involved various technologies and equipment that could be used to develop offensive weapons. Walking on the edge of what was legally permissible, almost touching the local laws and regulations of Xander, Liang Yue also accepted this kind of fishing behavior without refusal, and once again spent hundreds of millions, buying up the entire venue under the breathless silence and flushed faces of the surrounding travelers. Then, on the 4th day, another auction invitation was sent to him. This time, the scale involved in the venue and the goods became even larger, because in addition to normal industrial and agricultural products and high-tech production lines, it also involved the auction of some resource planets and rare metal deposits. At the meeting, someone's performance was still eye-catching. So soon, the invitation for the 3rd auction was sent to Liang Yue on the 6th day after he and others arrived on Xander. In this way, after attending 3 consecutive auctions, it may have been because he had reached certain conditions that he triggered the entry into the next stage. So, only 2 days later, an invitation to this contraband auction was sent to Liang Yue. How is it? Are there any life planets for sale in this auction? Good luck. There are indeed 2 life planets to be auctioned this time, one of which is actually much closer to Earth than Xander. Really? Let me see. Well, it seems to be indeed much closer, but it doesn't seem to make any difference to you according to the information collected by Liang Yue. This planet seems to have been auctioned a total of 3 times in the past 10 years, and this is the 4th time it has been auctioned. The previous few times, the handover procedures were also completed. Now that it has reappeared, I have reason to suspect that the institution or individual who put it up for auction is an illegitimate force, and they are playing a phishing game. It's normal. I'm actually phishing too. According to Liang Yue's information, the star-filled location of that life planet seems to be a bit close to the lair of a group of space pirates. Located on the edge of their sphere of influence, the starting price is only 100 million. Anyone with half a brain knows there's a problem. What about the other planet? The starting price is also 100 million. Liang Yue shows that there have been 4 successful auctions in the past 7 years. Its geographical location seems to be in a remote area, far from the star field centered on several civilizations in the Milky Way. However, many cosmic explorers have been exploring there recently, and this planet is probably located at an outpost in a certain direction. In this kind of place, there is no legal or regulatory constraint at all, so they are treating you like a fat sheep. Security issues don't need to be considered if you don't consider the security issues. The environment on these 2 planets seems to be very good. Basically, they haven't been developed much. According to the data, they are both in a barbaric stage. The distribution of water and soil is even, and the area of the ocean and land is about 6:4, even slightly better than Earth. The planet's orbit is relatively stable, and the seasonal distribution is similar to that of Earth. The average annual temperature difference is 7 or 8 degrees less than Earth, and the atmospheric composition is non-toxic, with a slightly higher oxygen content, but the problem is not too big. Are you planning to buy both of them? It seems that there is not enough funds based on the transaction prices of these 2 planets in previous auctions. The savings I have on hand should be able to buy one of them. At this moment, after learning that an invitation to contraband auction had been sent, everyone immediately gathered in a large circle in the rooftop garden. They checked the various auction items on the virtual network holographic display and discussed them with each other in low voices around. Liang Yue, Stark, Meng Xianwu, Guna, Tina, and others were also helping to analyze the various advantages and disadvantages of the information on the 2 life planets on the list. What security risks, phishing scams, slaughtering fat sheep? In fact, how could Liang Yue not know about this kind of simple gang routine? It's just that, with his current strength, he doesn't care about any conspiracies here. It's too low level. It's as if, in the entire Marvel universe, the civilizations or pirates that have reached the interstellar stage have never progressed in terms of intelligence. Perhaps it's because the development stage has arrived, and smart computers are too easy to use, so many things don't require people to use their brains. Perhaps it's because interstellar communication only emphasizes hard power, and conspiracies and tricks have mostly become useless. In short, these routines of phishing, deceiving, setting traps, and honey traps are not necessarily very clever even on Earth. When the time comes, if someone really treats him as a fat sheep and wants to slaughter him at will, then they will naturally have to be prepared to be retaliated against. Liang Yue is also planning to use the situation to his advantage and take the opportunity to reap a wave of spoils from those space pirates or other behind-the-scenes figures. Hey look, this auction item seems a bit unusual. At this moment, Moral, who had been shrinking in his arms, suddenly stopped flipping the holographic display screen with her small hand and pointed to an item on the light curtain. They were 3 exquisite saplings, full of green vitality from top to bottom, and the branches and leaves looked very tender. The root area was wrapped in black-brown mud and existed in a glass instrument. Most importantly, a circle of soft radiance was entwined around the saplings. In fact, among interstellar civilizations, some unique green plants are not uncommon, and even relatively rare varieties are nothing. After all, the universe is too big. Life planets are countless, and a few plants are generally not taken to heart. However, the 3 saplings in front of them were obviously unusual. In addition to the radiance entwined around the saplings, more importantly, the name of this plant was the Tree of Life. Chapter 857 Elemental Water. After a round of auctions that wasn't too intense but had a tight rhythm, Liang Yue, as desired and unsurprisingly, won the ownership of a life-sustaining planet, under the excited and expectant gazes of everyone around, and also those 3 life tree saplings, wrapped in a halo of light, giving people a feeling of prosperity slightly different from what everyone had guessed beforehand. Although the saplings of this life tree are considered rare in the entire universe, they are not necessarily that scarce because, as the mother of these saplings, The ancient tree of life itself is a highly productive magical plant. Every 10 years, a batch of saplings with an almost fixed quantity will be born. Then, they are planted by the elf race in various regions of their own planet, or on various planets in the cosmic starry sky, including the saplings at this auction. They were actually sent to the auction by the elf race themselves in addition to wanting to exchange them for a certain amount of inter-universal credit currency. More importantly, they actually want to transport the saplings of the Tree of Life to all parts of the universe through this method as a magical plant. The Tree of Life does have its unique features. It is said that the elf race on its original planet was born under the nurturing of this plant, but what is more regrettable is that it is not easy to grow from a sapling of the Tree of Life to the complete form of the ancient Tree of Life. There is no shortcut to the evolution of this magical plant, and it basically relies purely on the accumulation of a long period of time after planting the sapling. In the first 100 years, the sapling of this Tree of Life probably only has the function of purifying the air and fertilizing the soil. During this stage, the sapling on the ground will hardly grow at all, and will lie dormant there. All the nutrients will be taken away by the underground roots to extend themselves. About 150 years later, the sapling will enter the development stage, and depending on the environment, it will grow into a big tree ranging from 10 to dozens of meters. This stage will probably last for nearly 300 years. During this period, the Tree of Life will slowly give birth to some magical functions belonging to magical plants, for example, starting to generate and release elemental power of various elements on a small scale. At the same time, its purification function will gradually be strengthened, and the surrounding soil will also be improved into the most fertile soil by a variety of special substances secreted by the roots. The longer the time, the greater its function and coverage will be. Then, about 1,000 years after the sapling is planted, the Tree of Life will enter the growth period again, and depending on the growth environment, it will grow into a towering tree from hundreds to several hundred meters high. The Tree of Life at this stage can be regarded as officially entering adolescence. The formation of elemental power is further accelerated. Under its influence, the entire planet will slowly change towards a magical world. Then, the growth period of this Tree of Life begins to enter a stage measured in tens of thousands of years. During this period, various functions and magical properties will further mature and develop, and slowly but firmly evolve towards the kind of Tree of Life that people understand from certain literary works. It will not enter maturity until after hundreds of millions of years of rooting and growth, and the main body will grow to nearly 10,000 meters. At that time, the place where the Tree of Life is rooted will form a small amount of a high-level magical substance called elemental water. Its uses are very wide, including cultivation, meditation, spellcasting, instant recovery of magic power, making super magic scrolls, etc. It is something that all magical civilizations in the universe dream of. When the Tree of Life grows to 1 billion years, this stage of the Tree of Life can be called the ancient Tree of Life, and it can derive the ability to nurture the elf race. At this time, the ancient Tree of Life will not have much change in size, but the planet it is rooted in will be nourished and fed back by the tree body step by step, regularly, and actively. It attracts some meteorites, asteroids, and other celestial bodies from outside the sky and merges them into the rooted planet, further expanding the volume of the planet in general. The Tree of Life is indeed a magical species worth investing in, but because its growth time is too long, ordinary people simply cannot wait to see the day of return. Even a civilization or a planetary group can hardly bear such a time cost in a bizarre place like the Marvel Universe, which is destroyed, restarted, and restarted at every turn. It is basically hopeless to cultivate this magical species with a growth span of hundreds of millions of years. Who knows, one day, while you are eating hot pot and singing, you will be inexplicably and neatly taken away by the entire universe. Therefore, for auctions like the Tree of Life saplings, unless it is a god-level figure who is interested and plants a few in their own private universe as ornamental plants. After all, although this thing is also a good natural treasure, it is still far from the level of the world tree. Even if it grows to the complete form of the ancient Tree of Life, in the eyes of some great gods, it is just a relatively special magical plant. As for its ability to produce elemental water and so on, just Liang Yue herself, after advancing to the void refinement stage, can directly draw energy from the void, that is, the level of the quantum realm, to achieve an unlimited firepower supply. She doesn't care about these things at all. Therefore, except for those god-level figures, ordinary people basically don't care about its future growth potential. Occasionally, some wealthy people, or those civilized planets, symbolically buy a few trees, and they are all cultivated as landscape plants for purifying the air environment. As for the auction of that life-sustaining planet, the final result was also somewhat unexpected. because after repeated comparisons and considerations, Liang Yue did not bid for the planet closer to Earth. Instead, it was the one located on the edge of the main civilization intersection area, the outpost area of the wild and unexplored star field. The reason for this is that the undeveloped star field is very rich in resources. In contrast, although the life-sustaining planet closer to Earth has not been developed much, the green plants, soil, and animals are all pretty good. But after all, this planet is located on a relatively busy star field route. Its outer space, those asteroid belts, and the resources on other planets in the galaxy have basically been explored by those passing civilizations except for some of the cheapest iron and copper mines. Basically no rare metals of any value have been left behind. Even the area around the sun in this galaxy has been built into energy supply stations by some forces under the premise that Liang Yue doesn't care about the distance of the route. In terms of development potential, the former is definitely superior. So, who wants to come with me to see that planet? On the second day after bidding for that planet, after a series of handover procedures and a symbolic metal sovereignty certificate were delivered urgently by the express delivery company, Liang Yue's heart was also filled with ups and downs, and her emotion surged inexplicably after checking the star field map of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu and confirming the spatial coordinates of that planet. She couldn't wait to go and see the situation so that he can make some safety arrangements in advance. Chapter 858 Wild West. How long do you plan to stay there? Hearing Liang Yue's words, many people present showed interest, but their mission to Xander was also of great importance. The so-called travel wasn't just simple sightseeing. Almost everyone present for an inescapable responsibility, so Stark, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally, helped ask, I can come back anytime. This trip is mainly to understand the specific situation on that planet and prepare some safety measures to eliminate potential hazards. I estimate, at most, 3 to 5 days. Liang Yue thought for a moment after hearing this, and then said, then I'll go. Me too, I want to go and see the world too, and me. Based on the information from the previous auction, I found that the planet's environment is very primitive, and there seem to be a small number of small dinosaurs still existing, which is indeed worth observing. I noticed earlier that the scenery on that planet is very beautiful and spectacular, very worth exploring. Exploring an unknown primitive planet, this kind of opportunity is rare in my life. Very honored. Soon, the group reached a consensus on going to the desolate Starfield's life-bearing planet. The vast majority of people in the small broken building wanted to take a look at the novelty, including the researchers who successfully stayed behind during the first trip. Just like they said before, exploring a strange and desolate planet is not an opportunity that they can easily encounter in their lives, so the size of the team quickly expanded, and in the end, only 7 or 8 people on Xander were willing to stay behind to keep watch. Liang Yue looked at the sky in Xander at this time. It was about 2 hours before noon. He also calculated the rotation pattern of that planet, which was at 4 or 5 in the morning, about to usher in dawn. Feeling that there was no problem, he waved his hand and took out a medium-sized air transport vehicle, beckoning everyone to get in all at once, and then opened a space channel, leading everyone into it. This is a boundless wilderness here. There are towering giant stone forests, light-colored gravel everywhere, and the skyline between the distant mountains and the sky undulates, with beautiful and unparalleled curves, winding like a dragon under the reflection of the dim lavender sky. A large river pours down from between the two mountains, surging like a tide, rushing from the hazy distance, and then flowing along the trajectory of the hills to the distance. The sound of rushing water invisibly adds a lot of vitality to this quiet wilderness. After a while, at the top of the distant mountain, a touch of orange glow suddenly blooms in the lavender sky, gradually lighting up half of the sky. As time goes by, a red sun rises from the other side of the mountain, and the soft light breaks through the faint morning mist, dyeing this originally slightly monotonous world with brilliance. On the vast land, patches of meadows break out from between the rocks and debris, gently waving in the face of the sun and the breeze. Clusters of strangely shaped flowers grow on the rocks and cliffs, with bright colors and crystal dewdrops dotted between the petals, like clear emeralds. At this moment, Liang Yue and his party did not speak. The air transport vehicle under them also quietly changed from its original all-metal material to a transparent mode, quietly floating in the air more than 10 meters above the ground. Immersed in the magnificent beauty of this sunrise moment, it took a while to come back to their senses. The fact is indeed so. The life-bearing planet that Liang Yue photographed is itself a vast area. The sphere is 2 circles larger than the Earth, weighs 9 times the Earth, and has a surface area more than 3 times that of the Earth. But the gravity environment, air composition, etc. are similar to those on Earth, and the atmosphere is stable. The only difference is that the average temperature is 5 or 6 degrees lower, and the oxygen content in the air is a few percentage points higher, which is not a big problem in terms of geographical environment. According to the information given at the auction, 63% of the globe is water, and the distribution is relatively average. The highest peak is around 12,000 meters above sea level. There are also equatorial, temperate, and frigid zones, various tropical rainforests, temperate and frigid primeval forests, plateaus and mountains, snow-capped mountains, lakes, river valleys, basins, ocean islands, etc. There are large areas of plains and grasslands, dotted lakes, naturally formed deserts, as well as complex mountains, basins, river valleys intertwined to form complex mountains. Everything that can be found on Earth is here. In addition, there are 3 moon-like satellites orbiting on the side Liang Yue, and others are now located in the central and northern part of a continent, and this oil and water environment is much better than Central Asia and Northwest China. The only slight drawback is that there is a ring of small asteroid belts densely distributed outside this planet. Every once in a while, it may be affected by various complex factors and fall on this planet or a nearby satellite. However, this is not a big problem for Liang Yue. The existence of this small asteroid belt can just provide sufficient raw materials for future development. The environment in this area is a bit like the American West, magnificent, vast, and awe-inspiring, but the conditions here are obviously even better. An old handsome guy from the United States, with white hair and dressed in cowboy attire, looked at the increasingly bright and clear scenery outside the Airbus with a look of emotion. His heart seemed full of nostalgia while recording the video with his wrist computer. He couldn't help but sigh. According to the data on the instrument, the external gravity environment is about 1.04 times that of the Earth, which should not have much impact on us. It's just that the oxygen content is slightly higher, and it may take some time to adapt. A middle-aged woman with the gold-rimmed glasses and a scholarly appearance is also recording video data at this time. This is a scientist from the UK, who had already been stationed on the local Xander during the previous trip, so she's more comfortable with the use of various smart instruments at this time. While recording the video, she can also skillfully operate certain equipment in the Airbus to observe various external data. Of course, compared to those who are looking around at the scenery, there are also many people standing in the center of the Airbus, observing through the panoramic sand table with the coverage of this sand table. This method of observation is undoubtedly more intuitive. Even the small animals hidden in certain corners of this wilderness are now revealed without a doubt. While everyone was busy looking at the scenery, Liang Yue had quietly thrown 3 artificial satellites into outer space. Soon, the satellites were fully deployed, and connected to the panoramic sand table in the car under Xiao Wu's control. Just a few seconds later, a delicate and complex planetary model suddenly appeared on the holographic display next to it. There seem to be some man-made buildings here, and there are 2 scrapped spaceships parked next to them. But it looks like no one has lived there for a while. Did the people who took pictures of the planet leave them behind? Stark has good eyesight. At this time, he was holding a cup of Ling tea in one hand and pointing to a certain area on the planetary model with the other. Chapter 859 Superpathogens. Whoosh, leaving that wilderness, Liang Yue led everyone to the ruins that were clearly man-made at this time. The Airbus under them was not flying fast, maintaining a special mode of travel, reaching speeds more than 10 times the speed of sound, but the process was silent. There was no sonic boom or intense friction with the air, but rather like a fish swimming quickly in the water, sightseeing and traveling, like a fleeting glance, taking in the scenery along the way. High mountains and river valleys flash past the eyes of everyone, and countless tall and strong animals ran in groups on the vast grasslands around these creatures. There were also a few scattered groups of slightly smaller but extremely fierce predators. Thousands of streams and rivers meandered and flowed from the mountains, eventually merging into one, forming a large river, surging like a tide. Even the Amazon River, the largest in the world, was not enough to be compared with it in the depths of the deep blue ocean. Small islands like emerald necklaces were scattered, connected to each other, intermittently, jointly guarding a huge volcano. At the crater of the volcano, thick smoke was rolling into the sky, and hot lava flowed silently, eventually colliding with the surging tide, stirring up a large amount of water vapor in the place where light and darkness intertwined. Waves of more than 10 feet high stood tall, surging and turbulent above the sky. Thick dark clouds completely covered the sun. Hurricanes blew, and the sound of thunder was continuous. In an instant, a thick lightning bolt suddenly flashed past the side of the Airbus where Liang Yue and others were riding. Catcha, accompanied by a thunderclap like the opening of the sky. The whole world became pale at this moment. At this moment, a huge fish suddenly splashed out of the turbulent sea. It was covered with thick and rough skin, looking like a humpback whale that had been inflated more than 10 times, but it also had the characteristics of a dinosaur, with the arrogance of an ancient overlord, declaring its fearlessness to the sky and thunder. Soon, after passing through this storm area, Liang Yue and others came to another piece of land, or rather, this place is more like a large island, comparable to Australia compared to the previous continent, with complex terrain and thriving everything. This land now seemed a bit desolate. Most of the area was semi-desert and desert terrain, with very little vegetation, and large-scale rivers were also rare. The overall feeling was very desolate. In addition, the island was located at a relatively high latitude, so the temperature was also relatively low. After a while, everyone took the flying cart to the front of the building. This was roughly a flat land surrounded by low barren hills, and the building in front was also carved out on the basis of a stone mountain, which looked very old. Some of the building's features had already become blurred under the erosion of time, merging with the mountain vaguely. One could see some religious style from above. The overall shape of this building was a bit like a Mayan pyramid, rising hundreds of meters from the ground. The scale was really not small. Otherwise, even if Stark had good eyesight, it would be difficult to find. The mountainside was full of relief carvings and concave windows, which were already pitted and uneven below the mountain. Facing everyone was a dark archway. The light inside the stone gate was dim, but through the coverage of the panoramic sand table, everyone could still see the dilapidated ruins inside. Obviously, this place was once inhabited by people, or intelligent creatures, but now it was already empty. Even the two spaceships next to the ruins had become very dilapidated. Although the hull was still intact, the coating on the surface had been severely eroded. At this moment, I thought of a lot. This ruin is a bit too abrupt. Natural aging, spaceship crashes, energy depletion, retirement home, internal strife, primitive civilization guides, or encountered some other unknown danger. All are possible. If we encounter some kind of crisis, the most likely thing should be some kind of virus. It is indeed a topic worth exploring. It's really not like a normal person's choice to put it up for auction so casually. If there were patches of civilization ruins on this planet, I wouldn't think there was anything wrong, but if there is only this one place, it is indeed worth analyzing. Xiao Wu, I want you to detect the biological virus environment on this planet. As Stark's voice fell, a spherical colorless light wave suddenly spread out from the spaceship under everyone, like a special radar, constantly scanning the area within a few hundred miles. Faced with such an abrupt civilization ruin existing on this planet, the group of scientific researchers and observers in the Airbus cabin seemed very cautious at this time. However, more of it was the desire to explore the unknown planet. As a regular visitor to Liang Yue's house, Stark had a relatively deep understanding of some of the scientific research achievements and retrieval functions of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, and quickly entered the state at the same time, the other scholars on the ship, as top experts on Earth. Although their research fields were not necessarily in the direction of biological viruses, they also had extremely high professional qualities. A group of people quickly gathered together, discussing in low voices, and began to brainstorm ideas for Xiao Wu's testing equipment. As for the non-scientific research personnel in the team, the dignitaries from various countries, and even Kuna, Tina, Mileva, Aunt Liu, Meng Xianwu, Natasha and others, were not idle at this time, continuing to hold the computers on their wrists and standing on the periphery to record videos. Soon, after about a quarter of an hour, the intelligent brain Xiao Wu had results. According to the preliminary search, Xiao Wu found a total of 237 types of viruses within a radius of 200 kilometers, of which about 14 types are harmful to human individuals and cannot be overcome by the immune system, including 10 common disease viruses, 3 ancient viruses, and 1 superpathogen? Be specific. When the scientists heard this, their faces suddenly became serious. According to analysis, this bacterium is not formed naturally. It should have been born in the scientific research laboratory of a certain civilization, and it is a biological virus with certain nano-characteristics, belonging to a world-destroying biological weapon. It has great destructive and parasitic properties to the human body. Once invaded, the human body will die within 1 to 5 minutes, and new individuals will be born from the dead body. New individuals? What do you mean? This bacterium has the characteristics of rapid evolution and reproduction, just like some parasitic insects, absorbing nutrients from the host body to hatch new life forms. The extent to which it can be done specifically requires more professional instruments for testing. Sure enough, cheap goods are not good. What do you think, buddy? The planet you bought seems to be unclean, suspected to be a biological testing ground of some evil civilization. At this time, Stark turned his head to look at Liang Yue. with a hint of gloating on his face. Seeing this, Liang Yue glanced at this guy, the corner of his mouth curved, with an indifferent look. The next moment, he closed his eyes slightly, and when he opened them again, a layer of purple gold brilliance had appeared in his eyes. The divine sense that was originally solidified in the body in a natural state instantly spread out, and in just a few seconds, it had covered the entire planet between the flickering of his eyes. He quickly locked on the existence that Xiao Wu called a nano-level biological virus. Then, Liang Yue spread out one palm with a bend of his 5 fingers. A ball of bright blue, football-sized energy suddenly appeared on his palm, rippling slightly like water at the same time. Outside the Airbus, on this planet with a surface area more than 3 times larger than Earth, it was also instantly wrapped in a huge bright blue energy. Then, it flashed and disappeared. Looking at Liang Yue's palm at this time, the originally pure energy was densely covered with gray spots. On closer inspection, those gray spots did not seem to be honest, constantly swimming in the energy ball, with thousands of threads and clues. Just like a group of panicked ants among them, there were thousands or tens of thousands, and their bodies appeared particularly prominent, and their shapes were not black spots, but the shapes of various animals. Whoosh! The next moment, a burst of hot orange light suddenly rose, instantly covering the entire energy ball. The originally tangled mass of black spots was instantly burned into ashes. Chapter 860 Steel Torrent. Subsequently, Liang Yue waved his hand and dispersed the energy ball in his palm, and instead took out dozens of small, thin film space suits. These were the kind he had given to Stark as Christmas gifts back then, and on this basis, Xiao Wu had made many improvements to these space suits. The functions are more powerful. Not only is the usage time and period longer, but the spacesuit itself has also been given good defensive capabilities. Where it can effectively isolate you from contact with the outside air, regulate the internal air composition, filter out foreign toxins and harmful substances, and can also provide good defense in the face of some wild animals or crises. He handed out the protective suits, each about the size of a dollar coin, to everyone in the cabin. Stark's eyes lit up when he saw this, and he skillfully picked one up, pressed it against Pepper's chest, and then tapped it twice. Immediately afterward, a layer of light blue microelectric film unfolded and enveloped Pepper completely. Seeing this, the others around followed suit and put the thing on themselves. Afterward, Liang Yue led everyone to land on the ground. The hatch opened, and he, still wearing a modified Taoist robe, stepped out of the vehicle. The others behind him hesitated for a moment, exchanged glances, but finally took their steps. After looking around for a while, most of the crowd walked towards the 2 wrecked spaceships in unison. That building over there should be the warehouse used to store this virus. For ordinary people, this virus is indeed very dangerous. An infection will lead to rapid death within a few minutes. It destroys the human body's physiological health at the genetic level. Before we came here, the virus had already spread to every corner of this planet. I estimate it was done by the people on those 2 spaceships. It's a bit troublesome to clean up this virus with technological means, so it's better for me to take action and clean it all up at once. Liang Yue smiled and replied upon hearing this, "Are you sure it's all cleaned up? There are no hosts or remnants left." After listening to this guy's words, Stark thought for a while and then confirmed again with a serious face, "This virus is a biological weapon sufficient to destroy humanity on a large scale, but it is almost exclusively used to deal with humans. For other species, this virus is still lethal. However, they often do not kill other species besides humans, but choose to temporarily reside in the animal's body, lie dormant, or simply enter hibernation. Only when humans appear will they reawaken. Before, I had already scanned the species of the entire planet, including the interior of this planet, and completely burned this virus to death." Having reached his current realm, Liang Yue was also able to analyze the principle and essence of this biological weapon from a microscopic perspective through his own divine sense scanning. After all, the planet in front of him had already become his private property, and it was naturally not a wise move to allow such a deadly weapon to remain. Therefore, Liang Yue chose to clean it up directly as soon as possible. "The race that created this biological weapon is simply insane." After being silent for a moment, Stark then said with a sigh of emotion, "Then if we were to clean up this virus with technological means, what technology would we need to use?" At this time, Meng Xiaoyu suddenly looked at him and asked, "We can simulate the human immune system. Release a sufficient amount of nanobots to target, hunt, and eliminate this virus, covering the entire planet." Sounds like a lot of trouble. Oh, by the way, there is actually another kind of biological weapon stored in that warehouse over there. Liang Yue pointed to the dark stone archway on the opposite side at this time. But that biological weapon is not a virus, but an individual existing in a biological form. It can inject eggs into the human body or other organisms, absorb the host's genetic characteristics, and then hatch new individuals. The original biological weapon will die after laying eggs, and the newly emerged individuals will inherit the host's advantages and evolve into stronger hunters. That still sounds very dangerous. It's okay. This biological weapon is at least controllable. Robots and the like can effectively restrain them, and they can also be eliminated by conventional technological means. Okay, let's not mention this for now. Then how are you going to ensure that the race that created this extreme biological virus won't make a comeback? After all, judging from the layout here, they should have been to this planet a long time ago, and the purpose of storing the virus here is obviously to target humans and the coordinates of this planet for that race. It shouldn't be a secret, and even putting this planet up for auction this time may itself be a conspiracy. Mentioning conspiracy, the faces of everyone around Liang Yue suddenly became unsightly again. After all, this matter came a little too coincidentally. This is both a planet auction and a super biological virus, etc. Thinking carefully and connecting them, it's hard not to suspect that there is some twist in this, and if the development of the matter really tends towards the worst situation, then, when facing such an extreme race that can develop this kind of world-destroying virus specifically designed to destroy human organisms from the genetic level, the current situation of everyone is undoubtedly very dangerous. They here will inevitably bear the brunt and indeed need to prepare early. Faced with everyone's questions, Liang Yue didn't speak at this time, but smiled softly, and then waved his sleeves in an instant. The sky above the eroded ancient ruins and super biological weapons depot on the opposite side was directly cut open with a crack thousands of meters long, just like a huge scar cut out in the void. The next moment, the trace suddenly split to both sides, propping open a space channel with a diameter of several thousand meters. The other side of the channel is connected to Liang Yue's stronghold world. It was a vast desert, with no end in sight, and not a single cloud stained the azure blue sky. Xiao Wu, bring some combat power over to arm this planet. Yes, master. As the brief conversation between Liang Yue and Xiao Wu just ended, a group of gray shadows suddenly appeared in the distant sky on the opposite side of the space channel. Covering the sky and rushing over after a few seconds, they came to the opposite side of the channel, and then passed through the circular space door. Those were spaceships of various models, upholding Xiao Wu's minimalist geometric intersection construction style over the years. The large ones were 1,000 meters long and hundreds of meters wide, and the small ones were hundreds of meters long. They surged out of the channel in one go in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of thousands of ships poured in, dense and seemingly endless. These ships were silver gray in color, cold and uniform, advancing mightily, but hardly making any sound during the driving process. Silent, deep, vast, like a torrent of steel that people can't see the end of, with a suffocating sense of oppression, constantly heading into the distance. In just a moment, at least tens of thousands of ships had been used at the same time. In the gaps between the ships, in the warehouses of the large ships, there were also groups of combat individuals with even larger numbers, constantly awakening from dormancy. Those were humanoid mechas. The small ones were 3 to 5 meters long, and the large ones were 30 to 50 meters long, angular, flexible, and highly maneuverable. After passing through the space channel, they separated from the team and the ships like dumplings being dropped into a pot, and then scattered all over the sky. It took a full 10 minutes for the team on the other side of the space channel to finish walking. At this time, looking at the valley where everyone was, in sight, the originally clear sky had been completely obscured by countless ships and mechas, leaving not a single gap. The entire area was dark, and only the light blue light emitted by the ships and mechas themselves illuminated everyone's sight. Report, master. The combat power that has crossed over this time includes a total of 2.33 million various ships and 66.66 million various mechas. Please instruct. Sniff. I feel much safer now. Looking at the torrent of steel suspended in the sky, Stark subconsciously twitched his nose at this time, muttering to himself. His eyes were full of shock. Chapter 861. Eat beans. Xiao Wu, establish an early warning defense system throughout the entire star system. Every planet must have defensive weapons, including this planet's 3 satellites. Any incoming foreign spacecraft must report, and if any forcefully enter, destroy them directly after 3 ineffective warnings. Understood, master. In addition, I want you to build a star ring-like planetary defense weapon outside this planet's atmosphere, and then use this as a center to explore the surrounding star systems. Understood, master. Deployment system commencing. As Liang Yue issued the order, the fleet that had originally covered the entire sky began to move in batches and formations towards the outer atmosphere. A full 5 or 6 minutes passed before the sky above everyone's heads began to clear and brighten. However, The travelers were still immersed in deep shock, unable to recover for a long time after all. The scene was too terrifying for them. Tens of millions of combat units roared past before their eyes, seemingly chaotic, crowded, and of varying sizes. They were actually perfectly organized. At this time, Liang Yue suddenly thought of something, so he waved to the already empty sky. Then, a few seconds later, a black shadow flew rapidly from the blue sky, like a sudden meteor falling into the atmosphere, dragging a faint starlight tail behind it. After reaching a height of nearly 1,000 meters above the ground, it suddenly slowed down and then slowly descended. This was a mech with a size of about 30 meters, silver gray all over, round and chubby, with a big belly. After landing silently, a pair of searchlight-like eyes looked at the ruins Liang Yue mentioned. With blue light flashing in its pupils, a few seconds later, the round belly split in the middle like a Pac-Man's mouth, revealing the huge multi-barreled weapon launcher inside. Bang bang bang, accompanied by 3 muffled sounds. 3 spherical objects with a diameter of at least 1.5 meters were launched. The flight speed of these projectiles was not fast, seemingly using some kind of ejection principle. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, they plunged into the dark stone arch one after another. Subsequently, a pair of short legs like Michelin tires knelt directly on the ground, and the entire mech began to transform. The legs instantly turned into a half-meter thick metal platform, extending forward by about 10 meters. The round belly split in two, with a lower half swinging down to merge and connect with the platform. After a transformation, it formed a sophisticated instrument. The upper part, along with the tubular weapon launchers, was raised high, forming a ring, just like a sunflower emerging from the grass. The round head and the 2 round eyes like searchlights also changed their appearance, forming a lamp-style imaging instrument. As the intersecting beams released by the 2 circular light bulbs, a regular cave terrain began to appear in the imaging instrument below. Upon closer inspection, what was displayed was the outline of the opposite ruin, as well as the scene inside the archway. The passages inside were intricate, dense, and interconnected, vaguely showing a pattern. Each passage was 8 or 9 meters in diameter, interlacing with each other, all the way to hundreds of meters underground. The 3 spherical shells launched by the mech just now did not explode directly as everyone had expected. Instead, they floated in mid-air and continued to fly forward at a uniform speed. Whenever they encountered a fork in the road, they would split automatically. The process was very smooth from the original 3 to 6, and then from 6 to 9 and so on, constantly splitting to ensure that there were at least 3 small balls in each passage and fork continuously forward, downward, towards the deepest part of the passage. A moment later, as the small balls went deeper, the biological weapons Liang Yue mentioned appeared. They were living things in the shape of swimming snakes, slowly wandering in some dark caves with standing water. The whole body was white, with no scales on the surface, but wrapped in a layer of flexible, translucent skin. No eyes, the body and head slightly wider, looking like a scaleless cobra. But what grew in the mouths of these things were not snake teeth, but more like a mouthpart, similar to earthworms. In the mech's imaging device, Stark, Aunt Liu, and a group of scientists and observers who quickly came forward, could see rows of teeth in the mouth of this creature, as well as several pairs of arthropod feet shrinking under its abdomen. In addition, inside this creature, you can also see a soft V-shaped organ similar to a tongue. According to the imaging device's annotations, this is actually its egg-laying organ. However, the combat mech controlled by the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, as well as the small balls in the passage, did not give everyone time to carefully study this biological weapon. After all, the order they received from Liang Yue was to clear these things. Therefore, at the first time they reached the location of these creatures, the small balls began to show their ferocity in front of everyone. Swish! In an instant, the one that had been rushing at the forefront of the combat units, composed of 3 small balls, instantly split into countless balls. Like a hazy light and shadow, it shot in all directions. Through the display of the phenomenon equipment, the surrounding people could find that these split small balls were actually not spherical, but nano-robots covered with serrations. Constantly rotating and sprinting, these robots have super organization and resilience. With their small size, they can quickly rebound and accelerate in the 8 or 9 meter passage. In the process, these nano-robots themselves can still maintain the overall coordination, and constantly adjust their own bouncing trajectory according to the surrounding terrain. In the moment of rebounding and cutting, ensure that there is no collision between each other, but in the blink of an eye, the originally slightly rough passage walls were neatly scraped off a thick layer of stone powder, becoming exceptionally smooth, and the snake-bodied biological weapons hiding in the standing water below were instantly broken down into countless pieces under such an attack. Subsequently, the nano-robots, which were originally seemingly scattered and chaotic, concentrated on each other from all parts of the passage in an instant, recombined in the center of the passage, and then continued to fly forward. However, this is not over yet. The other two small balls behind them each entered the arena with an electromagnetic protective cover on top, one in front and one behind, about 10 meters apart from each other. The one in front, after reaching the destination, instantly opened countless injection pores on the surface of the sphere. Rotating forward while flying at a uniform speed, it continuously sprayed a blue-white cryogenic gas. In an instant, the originally humid underground passage rapidly dropped to more than 200 degrees below zero, and a thick layer of white frost formed on the ground and cave walls, not to mention the standing water on the ground. It was directly frozen into solid ice immediately afterwards. The small ball behind followed up, also opening countless injection holes on the surface. Whoosh! The next moment, a large swath of blazing white flame sprayed frantically, directly filling the entire passage. Saturated flames directly increased the inside of the passage from more than 200 degrees below zero to more than 3,000 degrees in an instant. The cave walls, originally covered with white frost, were directly baked into lava color. Everything in the passage, solid ice, water vapor, those biological weapon residues, and even stone powder, were directly dissolved into nothingness. Such a scene is constantly being staged in every passage. Everything is carried out in an orderly manner. Chapter 862, Alien Origin? However, in this underground cave, there was naturally more than just the snake-shaped creature as a biological weapon. Through the imaging device of the spherical mech, the group quickly discovered some unusual creatures inside the ruins. Just then, near the bottom-level passage, in some shadowy caves in the corners, there were about 20 humanoid reptilian creatures entrenched. They had large heads, protruding jaws with big teeth, prominent spines on their backs, and slender, sharp tails behind their buttocks. Although these creatures had low body temperatures, close to being cold-blooded, and the layer of skin covering their bodies seemed to have good camouflage and even shielded them from detection. However, as a biological weapon with only special genes and cautious movements, but without any extraordinary powers, its camouflage effect was still very limited. Before the super-intelligent optical brain, Xiao Wu, which had been revolving around Liang Yue, a multi-system cultivator, since its inception, this ability was nothing. The cleanup operation in the upper passage of the ruins quickly attracted the attention of these humanoid creatures. With their keen hearing and instinctive mobility, they quickly encountered the piles of small spheres. As a result, these humanoid creatures, who thought they were very hidden, either hiding in the shadows of the passage or climbing on the top of the cave, were decomposed by countless nanobots in just one encounter, before they even had time to do anything. Then, following closely behind, were the rapid freezing and high-temperature flames to destroy the corpses. In less than 5 minutes, the biological weapon warehouse in the entire ruin was cleared by the spherical mech next to it. In fact, most of this was due to Liang Yue's efforts. Previously, when he was using the power of space to globally capture that super biological virus with gene clusters, he had also burned down the massive stock of viruses piled up by aliens in this ruin warehouse. The remaining snake bodies and humanoid creatures were just some parasitic bodies with little infectivity. These biological weapons also posed a considerable threat to humans, capable of injecting their eggs into the human body, thereby plundering human genes to breed new individuals. The 20 or so humanoid new species in the underground passage should have originated from these two scrapped spaceships on the ground. However, these evolved humanoid creatures were far less destructive and troublesome than simple gene viruses. At best, they were just single-on-one biological hunting tools. From the moment Liang Yue discovered their traces, their fate was already sealed. And when he saw this biological weapon, Liang Yue roughly guessed its origin and some related plot in his mind. Alien origin. In the original plot, that race that liked to drink a bowl of gene virus, dissolve themselves, spread all things on the primitive life planet, and claimed to have created humans, and was also mysteriously religious. It seems that they liked to build such biological weapon storage depots on some planets, with the purpose of exterminating the humans they had spread throughout the universe when necessary, creating humans on one hand, and destroying their own genetic derivatives on the other. This behavior, in addition to being a different kind of life experiment, is also very consistent with the religious tradition setting of that race. In the plot, they probably really regarded themselves as superior creators, accustomed to adopting God's perspective to view humans. Unfortunately, they were eventually wiped out by intelligent robots made by humans. Very fateful and ironic. As for where the plot has progressed now, Liang Yue is not sure yet. After all, as an interstellar race, It is unlikely that they would only store this gene virus and parasitic biological weapons in the early stages of Alien on one planet. It is also unlikely that the planet he bought is the same one that the protagonists landed on in the plot. Firstly, things would not be so coincidental, and secondly, the technology of the Earth's humans and major countries has not yet reached the level of interstellar travel and exploration. At this time, the people at the scene mostly seemed a little dazed. Perhaps it was because Liang Yue and the round-bellied mech next to him were too decisive in dealing with these alien biological weapons and nanoviruses, and the process was too smooth across the screen. It was difficult for everyone to have a direct sense of the threat of these biological weapons that were cleared away like chopping vegetables, including Stark, Meng Xianwu, Guna and others. They all seemed a little confused at this time, perhaps in their cognition. A few people have to die blatantly in front of them, with real-life examples of tragic situations and the encounters of the dead, in order to arouse the pain and sense of crisis in their hearts. Too bad. Okay, some of the safety threats on this planet have been eliminated. Next, there are only some conventional wilderness factors to be restricted. How do you plan to spend these days? After solving a series of aliens and snake-body facehuggers in the ruins, Liang Yue then looked at the crowd next to him and asked about their plans, and these scientists and observers were obviously very clear about the purpose of this trip. After all, they came with Liang Yue this time to investigate and detect this emerging life. Soil superbiological viruses, aliens, etc., are just small episodes that happened unexpectedly in the middle. Therefore, after Liang Yue personally announced that he had resolved the abnormal crisis on this planet, the group of travelers naturally wanted to conduct investigations on this land according to their previous ideas. Of course, this planet, located on the edge of the barbaric star field, is not Earth after all. The existing number of humans is only these dozens of people present. It is naturally more difficult for a group of scientific researchers who are not good at physical strength to do wilderness survival and scientific investigation on a planet that is almost impossible to find any civilization and is completely in a wilderness and barbaric state. Even for those top observers sent to Xander by various countries, the difficulty of surviving on this planet, which is in the late dinosaur era, is definitely not small. Therefore, in order to ensure the safety of this group of people, Liang Yue once again took out dozens of mechas from the stronghold world and distributed them to everyone. It is the smallest type, 3 meters high. And there is also a smart program controlled by Xiao Wu as an auxiliary mech with the assistance of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu. The satellites that Liang Yue had thrown into the sky earlier had begun to operate normally, and completed the real-time mapping of the surface of this planet in a very short time. Don't look at it as just the smallest mech, but the functions it should have are all the same: high-speed flight, guarding, combat, early warning, isolation, monitoring, observation, telephone communication, and even health maintenance are just standard features on this combat unit. In addition, with a network connection function on these mechas, the drivers sitting on it can also determine their coordinate positions in real time, anytime and anywhere, and share the planet-level panoramic sandbox map and data. After putting it on, everyone will basically be in an invincible state on this planet, without fear of any crisis. In addition, Liang Yue can also monitor this planet in all directions at any time, and he can also carry out rescue at any time, even if he happens to encounter a crisis that cannot be dealt with. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 863 Academy Concept. What are you planning to do next? After boarding their longed-for mechas, Stark, Meng Xianwu, and the others didn't leave immediately. Instead, they circled in the sky before returning to the front of the ruins. At this moment, a spherical robot was busy retrieving the 3 nano-weapon spheres from the underground passage through the imaging equipment. It could be seen that the small spheres scattered throughout the underground ruins were now returning at a constant speed, similar to when they were launched, but in reverse. At each fork in the road, small spheres would merge in pairs, uniting with each other in a very smooth process. Furthermore, during their return to the surface, these nanospheres were also reviewing and searching for any remaining targets. Unfortunately, Liang Yue was equally concerned about searching for viruses and aliens, as this entire planet would become his private territory from now on, and he naturally wouldn't allow any potential hidden dangers to exist. By the time Stark landed on the ground with Pepper in their mech, the weapon retrieval was just completed. Liang Yue then pressed down from afar, Raising his hand to flatten the stone mountain where the ruins were located from the ground, the hundreds of meters high stone mountain was forcibly pressed into the ground. During this process, large amounts of granite were directly compressed into molten lava, which was poured into the ground, completely melting the entire underground passage. I plan to build some structures to serve as my future residence here, and then screen the plants and animals on this planet to see if any are worth introducing back to Earth in terms of pure growing environment. This planet, which is in the late dinosaur era of its primitive stages, has some considerable differences from Earth. At the very least, the oxygen content in the atmosphere is significantly higher here than on Earth. Although it's only a few percentage points, humans and animals might be able to adapt, but plants might not. A change in environment could easily cause a mass extinction. However, fortunately, Liang Yue's small city has the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, so everything is not a problem. It's time to build a place to live. So, have you chosen a location yet? It'll probably be on the previous continent. This place is too desolate. Let's nurture it for now. After it's built, I'll share the address coordinates with you. Okay, that's good. That what? Forget it. Pepper and I are going to explore first. See you later. Goodbye. Watching Stark's back as he hesitated before leaving, looking somewhat preoccupied, Liang Yue couldn't help but smirk in his heart. He naturally knew what the other party wanted. After all, such a thing as a friend with a good relationship, suddenly buying a planet to cash out his money and becoming a planet owner, would make anyone on Earth restless, surging with emotions, as if in a dream. In this situation, they instinctively want to do something. In fact, it wasn't just Stark. The group of scientists, observers, wealthy tycoons, and dignitaries from various countries who left earlier also seemed preoccupied. They wanted to speak, but didn't know how to start. Among them, naturally, were Aunt Liu and others who stayed by his side all along. What are you planning to do with this planet? After repeated eye contact and tactical communication, it was his little secretary, Meng Xiaoyu, who finally stepped forward to talk to someone. Haven't thought about it yet. Let's see first, Liang Yue said, looking at the little girl with a somewhat playful expression. Such a big planet, with a surface area more than 3 times that of Earth. If calculated according to the specific sea-land ratio, the area is even larger. Such a place, it's impossible to just use it as a vacation villa where a few of you occasionally come to stay, right? That's too wasteful, and humans are social animals. Just a few of you would be too lonely. Before long, this place will become a pure land that all Earthlings envy, humanity's second home in the universe. What do you think? That reason is a bit far-fetched, and this planet is originally mine, but before long it will be built into the home of all mankind. Wouldn't I be at a bit of a loss, Tisk? Then what do you say? You certainly don't want to live alone, or just with a few women around you, and a bunch of machines on such a big planet, right? Well, then how about we create an academy? As he spoke, Liang Yue's mind moved, and the orange magic coil suddenly converged in the void, instantly opening a space channel beside him. Then, he waved his hand at Meng Xiaoyu, Aunt Liu, Kuna, Tina, and Mileva here, and took a few people along with the mechas beside them, and came to an area of rolling hills and lush vegetation on the other side of the passage. This is a vibrant mix of plains and hills, with occasional small mountains rising up, but not appearing abrupt. Not far away, 2 rivers converge. Groups of birds and unnamed beasts run in the primitive riverside and valley, and the location of this area is precisely the vast continent where they were when they first came to this planet. Create an academy? What kind of academy? Meng Xiaoyu kept her head down at this time, and after coming over, she was not in the mood to appreciate the surrounding natural scenery, and focused on quickly thinking about Liang Yue's plans. Liang Yue did not answer when he heard this, but gently beckoned to a more abrupt mountain not far away. Rumble with a slight earth-shattering sound, swaths of buildings began to rise from the ground. The style is basically similar to classical Chinese architecture, but on this basis, there are still many innovations. In addition to the pavilions and towers built according to the terrain, there are also many high-rise buildings that are not common in classical culture. Green stones everywhere, surrounded by green trees. With a tendency to online game style, but specifically to the interior decoration of the building, most of them are the minimalist route of modern people, a bit of imitation of the ancient meaning, but the overall decoration style is more inclined to the hotel. In addition, on the periphery of this building, at the foot of the mountain, there is also a 10-meter high, 5 or 6 meter wide stone wall. After completing the temporary residence, Liang Yue looked at this building, thought for a moment, and then spread his 5 fingers, and the green lantern ring suddenly bloomed with a green glow. After a few breaths, a green sapling appeared in his palm with a gentle throw. The sapling was planted by him in a concave valley in the center of the building complex. A few minutes later, a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy began to be transformed from the sapling and slowly extended and spread to the surroundings. Liang Yue himself was still looking at the surrounding environment after carefully considering for a moment. He then turned to his sleeve again, took out a seedling of the tree of life from his storage space. He planted it on the hill where everyone was originally. He wanted to find a good place for the tree of life, but after thinking about it, he finally felt that it would be more practical to keep it under his nose. As for the changes in the surrounding terrain that will inevitably be caused after this thing grows, with him around, no changes can cause any waves. You guys go to that yard and stay for a while, Liang Yue said at this time, pointing to the classical building he had just built not far away. The people didn't ask much when they heard the words, and each entered the inside of the mech. After a leap, they fell on the city wall at the foot of the mountain. The mech uses a technology that combines mechanical and biological brainwave connections. After wearing it, the entire mech seems to merge with the driver and become an extension of the driver's limbs between every move. A feeling of hand-eye coordination is born in terms of operation. There is basically no difficulty. Moreover, there is also Xiao Wu's intelligent clone assisting, so not only Stark, a senior mechanical enthusiast, but even the group of scientists and dignitaries from various countries are very easy to get started. Chapter 864 Magic Ring. The sapling of the Tree of Life, once planted, reacted almost instantly upon contact with the soil on the mountaintop. Its originally curled roots began to show signs of growth and expansion. The few remaining tender leaves on its branches also started to sway and unfurl. It was like a newborn life form, unable to comprehend the complexities of the world, cautiously probing and observing its surroundings simultaneously. Within the sapling of the Tree of Life, a dormant mental energy seemed to be slowly awakening as its roots settled. This was a peculiar mental energy, like a seed, somewhat weak but with decent strength. As this mental energy slowly radiated, it would naturally create a deterrent effect on the surrounding things, plants, and animals, and to some extent, gain their affinity, a combination of kindness and power, to prevent erosion and harm from individual biological species. After observing for a while, Liang Yue felt that this should be the care from the mother Tree of Life, a protective measure specifically applied to the saplings before they were sent away. Just a matter of course. Soon, in about a quarter of an hour, the sapling had rapidly awakened from its original dormant state, and then carefully began to grow. The underground root system had already begun to spread downwards. However, this growth momentum was not fast, far from reaching the level of those mysterious species that Liang Yue knew, which could instantly root tens of thousands of meters, hundreds of meters, or tens of meters underground. This tree, in front of him, stopped moving after rooting about half a meter, probably because the energy stored in its body was not enough. This newborn sapling still appeared very weak, with almost no difference from the surrounding flowers, plants, and trees, except for a faint layer of light on its surface. If this trend continues, it will probably remain ordinary for the next hundreds or thousands of years, growing silently like an ordinary tree, and then spend hundreds of thousands of years to nurture magic. Liang Yue didn't have time to waste with it. After all, how many years has he been in this world? So, he flipped his sleeve, and a ball of liquid the size of a basketball immediately appeared on his palm, verdant, transparent, shimmering with green light, and full of vigorous vitality. It was precisely the byproduct derived from the transformation of heaven and earth spiritual energy. By the emerald sapling diluted tens of thousands of times, it can be used to stimulate the growth of various pastures in the small town farm, and can be harvested about 3 times a day. The sapling of the Tree of Life is a special treasure of heaven and earth. Although the rank is not as good as the world tree, it is estimated that it will not be too low. However, since they are both plants, the problem should not be too big. He casually threw the liquid, and the emerald green liquid immediately poured down from top to bottom, drenching the sapling of the Tree of Life. However, almost at the instant the two came into contact, they began to merge rapidly, or rather, the emerald liquid was quickly absorbed into the sapling's body, like a of water sprinkled on a sponge. Vaguely, Liang Yue could even hear the cheers from the mental realm of the sapling in front of him rumble the next moment, accompanied by a violent earth-shattering. The original tender sapling seemed to instantly transform into a group of emerald green flying snakes. Dense claw-like root systems began to extend rapidly into the depths of the earth, constantly thickening, lengthening, and becoming rugged and heavy. Some of the root hairs that originally grew on the lateral roots, whether intentionally or unintentionally, completely concealed the original hundreds of meter-high hill. Patches of winding roots emerged directly from the ground, appearing silver-brown, and constantly covering the surrounding ground and the main root of the Tree of Life. Under the mental probe of Liang Yue, had directly plunged into the depths of the ground tens of thousands of meters in a very short period of time. Subsequently, the dense root system almost presented a beautiful semicircle, covering all the soil around the main root. In the distance, the river that originally meandered through the wilderness plain was now directly stirred by the huge tree roots, changing its course and shifting the hills, turning into a lake, constantly injecting clear water into it. Similarly, the above-ground parts of the tree, the trunk, branches, and green leaves, were also constantly stretching and covering towards the sky under the stimulation of the emerald liquid. In just over 10 minutes, the originally slightly weak sapling had directly grown to 5,000 or 6,000 meters in height. Just the main trunk alone, the diameter of this main trunk alone was 600 or 700 meters. The branches reached the sky, covering the sun. The huge emerald green canopy was like a giant umbrella, with a coverage area almost equal to the highest point of the main trunk. The branches were lush and full of vitality. After the canopy grew to its extreme, a circle of colorful rainbow light suddenly derived itself. It was like the colors refracted from the countless emerald leaves under the sunlight, and it was also like a magical secret force, shrouding the canopy from the sky. Liang Yue felt a strong elemental power within it, constantly spreading outward through the body of the Tree of Life, according to the feedback from the will of the Tree of Life itself. This was an ability that it naturally formed after growing to a certain stage. Magic ring, wherever it exists, within a certain range, the efficiency of magic meditation, magic condensation, cultivation, and recovery is doubled. This information was not in the information about the Tree of Life at the previous auction. Obviously the elves had held back. In addition, according to the Tree of Life, although it has been forcibly ripened by Liang Yue with treasures of heaven and earth, its body has grown to the level of 50 to 60,000 years. However, only the tree body has been ripened, and the spiritual and will level inside the Tree of Life has not been able to get too much improvement. Fortunately, when they were born in this lineage, they could actually obtain an inheritance from the mother Tree of Life, hidden in their own lifeblood. Only after growing to a certain stage can they awaken and comprehend it by themselves, which contains some of the secrets of accelerated growth of this race, as well as practical knowledge. After the tree body was ripened, this part of the inheritance had already run out by itself, so the current Tree of Life needs to be silent for a period of time to absorb and grow. During this period, the safety of this tree naturally falls on Liang Yue. Liang Yue was a little surprised by this, but he didn't think it was a problem. The planet under him has already become his personal property. In order to ensure the safety here, this guy has released tens of millions of combat units. Currently, he is building a defense system covering the entire galaxy. Ensuring the safety of a tree is naturally more than enough. However, such a behemoth, 5,000 or 6,000 meters high, with an underground part covering tens of thousands of meters, suddenly rooted down, its appearance is obviously no longer a matter of planting a sapling. Looking around, the original vast plains, hills, and rivers have now changed their appearance. The small mountain where the sapling was originally located has completely disappeared. Under the coverage of the huge root system of the Tree of Life, the plains and hills have instantly turned into swamps. The river was directly cut off, and a large amount of water was incorporated under the cover of the root system. A foreseeable lake is slowly forming within the area covered by the roots. The groups of animals and birds that originally lived in the surrounding areas have long been frightened and disappeared. Fortunately, Liang Yue chose this flat area large enough when choosing the location of the station. The coverage area of the Tree of Life only occupies a small part of it. In addition, the temporary courtyard built by Liang Yue against a mountain has already been pushed out of the swamp area by him with a wave of earth, along with this small mountain, at the first moment of the Tree of Life's crazy growth. Chapter 865 Extraordinary Source. As night fell, the sunset in the sky was gradually fading at a speed almost visible to the naked eye, leaving only a fiery afterglow on the distant horizon. On the other side of the sky, two seemingly round moons were already hanging in the dark night sky. One was golden and frighteningly large, completely different from the moon on Earth, while the other was slightly dimmer and more blurred, with a light pink hue. Of course, these two unfamiliar satellites were not the only colors in the night. As time passed, the last rays of the setting sun completely disappeared, and the night sky gradually brightened, revealing an unfamiliar and profound galaxy. Stars twinkled, densely packed, countless, and captivating. At this moment, everyone who had been observing and wandering around the planet, in various secret valleys, mountains, rivers, forests, glaciers, and other terrains for the entire day, had also come to the temporary residence by the Tree of Life, following Liang Yue's instructions for the travelers who were piloting Gundams. Although the planet they were currently on was very large, with a surface area more than 3 times that of Earth, They could rely on the era-defining protective equipment beneath them even from the farthest point from this temporary residence. It would take them no more than 15 minutes to fly across the planet as his first visitors after becoming the planet's owner. Liang Yue naturally wouldn't mistreat the people before him. He not only provided excellent and convenient conditions for their travel and accommodation, but also specially instructed the intelligent AI, Xiaowu, to select a batch of unique species from the planet's complex flora and fauna, and to serve them with spiritual wine from the stronghold world for tonight's dinner party. However, compared to the fragrant delicacies on the outdoor dining table, everyone around seemed more interested in the brilliant galaxy and the magnificent tree of life, which resembled a mountain under the starlight against a backdrop of a magical halo that was displaying a profound seven-colored glow. The massive tree of life was deeply challenging everyone's worldview with a shocking perspective and posture. In the past, on Earth, the extraordinary power, known for its mystery and seclusion, was now standing in front of them so openly those seated here were not ordinary people. Whether they were outstanding scientists at the forefront of various fields on Earth, or influential politicians and dignitaries who controlled the capital of various countries, their current positions naturally meant they had seen a lot. Some secret inheritances, mysterious powers, and extraordinary phenomena on Earth might only be legends for ordinary people, but they were not unfamiliar to these people. The previous alien invasion events, while refreshing the worldview of Earth's people to some extent, were actually just another addition to the many unusual things they had seen. But even so, they were still deeply shocked by the lush and towering tree of life before them. The majestic grandeur, the real magic, and the accessible extraordinary were so irresistible that one glance could deeply attract them. It was as if the giant tree and the seven-colored halo surrounding the thick trunk had magic. Well, as a genuine source of magic and elemental power, the tree of life was indeed extraordinary. Although it couldn't compare to the world tree, it was still worthy of being called a remarkable treasure, especially after being ripened by Liang Yue with a green liquid. The tree of life was now about 50 to 60,000 years old, and it had naturally given birth to many miraculous things, from the most direct massive size, the seven-colored magic halo surrounding it, to the magic and magical elements that were constantly emitted. All of these could subtly affect everything around it. Everything near the tree of life, whether it was an ordinary and inconspicuous grass or tree, or the river and stream that happened to flow through this place, was now passively receiving its gift and transformation. Undergoing profound changes in silence. Even the most inconspicuous oil around was now changing under the special effect of the tree of life, according to the information left by the elf race at the auction, and the content that the tree of life told Liang Yue before it fell asleep. No matter what the original nature of this oil nearby was, it would be transformed into the most fertile land in nature. The same situation also happened to the animals, insects, birds, fish, and even the many kinds of dinosaurs in the vicinity and even on the entire planet. The appearance of the tree of life would directly affect their subsequent evolutionary paths. This was originally an ordinary and precious planet of life in the universe, but it would undergo a decisive deviation due to the sudden arrival of the tree of life. This was a turning point for the species of a series, a whole planet, to move from ordinary to extraordinary. Their fate would undergo tremendous changes under someone's momentary whim. The reason why the people at the table were absent-minded, and everything tasted like chewing wax, was also for this reason. Faced with a giant tree that seemed like a miracle, and the dazzling magic halo, they would naturally be attracted and even guided by certain biases, no matter what their identities were on Earth, or what professions they were engaged in. They were just ordinary people in front of such an extraordinary source, faced with important things that could cause a turning point in their own life, nature, development path, and even life level. No one could remain calm even if it was just out of human instinct. They would be unknowingly attracted to it. Their whole state was between being dazed and shallow sleep. Even Stark, who was known for his extraordinary aptitude for mystical cultivation in the multiverse, could not avoid it at this time. Seeing this, Liang Yue didn't indulge them, and picked up a chopstick and tapped it on the glass next to him. The crisp collision sound seemed to carry a kind of thought-provoking and inspiring power, instantly pulling everyone at the banquet back from a dazed state. Alright, this tree of life, magic halo, and so on, are indeed a decisive force that can give birth to a magical world, but you don't seem to have the conditions to enter into cultivation now. If you really want to practice, I can pass on a basic method of meditation to you later. Now, let's eat first. The main purpose of everyone coming to this planet with Liang Yue this time was actually just for investigation and sightseeing. To put it bluntly, it was just to watch the excitement. Bearing heavy responsibilities, they would have to return to Xander within 2 or 3 days to continue their mission. Although for most of them, even if they returned to Xander, They would only need to click on a shopping item on the computer menu after careful consideration and discussion with others. But cultivation is not as simple as treating guests to dinner, it also requires time to hone. Chapter 866 The Ambition of Earthlings. What are you planning to do with this planet? Didn't you say you wanted to build an academy? What are your specific plans? After a meal eaten in a bland atmosphere, the group, having received the basic meditation technique from Liang Yue, quickly returned to their respective rooms, taking advantage of the excellent environment to begin their cultivation. Of course, not everyone was so eager. Some, with more ideas and closer relationships with Liang Yue, such as Aunt Liu, Meng Xiao, Stark, Natasha, Calson, Tina, Mileva, Guna, and others, didn't rush back to their rooms. Instead, they followed him to a viewing pavilion enclosed by glass walls, admiring the strange and magnificent galaxy while accompanied by the towering tree of life, and began a more in-depth discussion. His little secretary, Meng Xiao, couldn't help but speak first. Taking advantage of Liang Yue's ambiguous replies to continue pressing him. I can roughly understand your thoughts. My plan is actually very simple. This planet is now my private property. From current observations, the geographical environment, resources, and other aspects are all quite good. The surrounding areas of the planet are also almost undeveloped, and the conditions in all aspects are much better than Earth. After my transformation today, it probably won't take long. It should be able to transform into a place that can support orthodox cultivators to inherit and cultivate. A planet like this will make many people jealous. As he spoke, Liang Yue took a sip of the spiritual tea in his hand, turned around, and leaned his arm on the windowsill in front of him, his gaze naturally looking towards the opposite night sky, at the various animals that were moving. Upon hearing the news, relying on their own instincts to continuously rush over. Among them were a large number of dinosaurs, reptiles, mammals, birds, and even various strange insects, densely packed and countless. And as time passed, there were still a large number of living creatures constantly rushing from farther places, from all directions. Currently, these animals stopped at the outermost boundary of the area covered by the roots of the tree of life. A large number of carnivorous dinosaurs, herbivorous dinosaurs, flying dinosaurs, and even various animals of different sizes couldn't help but stop, anxious and restless, roaring incessantly, pacing back and forth, wanting to go forward, but obviously hesitant in the dark. There was a kind of aura near the tree of life that made them extremely awed, as well as a faint mental deterrent, hindering their progress. Obviously, the existence of the tree of life is a valuable asset for any creature on this planet because it concerns evolution, although these creatures have not yet developed any higher intelligence. Their instinctual perception as biological species, their sixth sense, clearly tells them that the giant tree opposite is emitting a power that can make them stronger. Of course, compared to the tree of life, the attraction of magic power and magic elements to these native species, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth emitted by the small green tree that Liang Yue planted on this hill, is equally fatal to them. There are also many kinds of animals, birds, insects, etc. surrounding the bottom of the hill. It's just that the tree of life has a larger coverage area, so the scene appears more spectacular. Wanting but unable to obtain, wanting to advance but not daring to, driven by this complex emotion. The plain and hilly area at this time can be described as a chorus of beasts, with various roars, hisses, and cries rising and falling, forming a continuous sound. Fortunately, Liang Yue had made preparations in advance and set up an isolation array around the hill. Otherwise, not to mention meditation and cultivation, the roars from the ancient wild beasts alone would be enough to scare these self-proclaimed elites from civilized society to death. However, I feel a bit shortchanged if I just hand over the planet to you for joint development and turn it into a second home for humanity, so I plan for the time being, I will set up an academy-like institution on this planet. Whether it's cultivation or scientific research, the Earth side can treat this place as a transfer station from here, explore the interior of this planet, or use this as a center to explore the depths of the universe. In fact, to put it bluntly, Liang Yue's plan is that his planet can be regarded as a flag planted by the human race of Earth in the galaxy. It marks that humans have found another foothold in the Milky Way. Liang Yue, as a native of Earth, can bring his folks from his hometown to play and stay temporarily, and it's okay to do some research, but the ownership of the property here, the mountains and rivers, the natural creations, etc., still belong to him. The meaning in Liang Yue's words is not difficult to understand, and the intelligence of the people around him is not a problem, so they almost all understood in a second. Meng Xiao, Stark, Calson, and others, chose to stay and talk to him at this time, in fact, to test Liang Yue's attitude to see what this guy's future development plan is for the planet in front of him. In fact, as long as they can determine that Liang Yue is willing to talk to them. It's fine. What they fear most is that he is stingy and really regards this place as his exclusive territory, playing the set of private property being sacred and inviolable according to the current common criteria on Earth. This attitude is naturally reasonable, legal, and justifiable, at least on the surface. And Liang Yue himself has the strength to play like this, but for the future of mankind. Now that they have determined his attitude, Aunt Liu and others naturally have a bottom line in their hearts, so in the following time, they began to have a superficial discussion with Liang Yue about the academy concept he proposed, and then, based on this, further, simply test the bottom line of this guy. For example, how many people he can accept to station here, how many countries on Earth are qualified to send people here, and what are the standards here, and so on. Just as Meng Xiaoyu said before, although this planet is Liang Yue's private property, its appearance is of extraordinary significance even if someone does not intend to share it with various countries on Earth and create a second home for mankind. As long as the plan is good enough, many significant projects can still be made around the limited space. Of course, how big a splash can be made in the end actually depends on Liang Yue's support. For example, once people from Earth come here, the first thing they face is the problem of survival, not to mention other things. Liang Yue will definitely out a safe area for his fellow villagers at that time, but the planet in front of him is still in the dinosaur age. After all, the dinosaurs all over the world are still the overlords of this life planet. Plus those unknown ancient beasts. If humans want to explore outwards and expand their living space, they will inevitably conflict with them. Weapons to defend against enemies are naturally the key. If Liang Yue can support a batch of mecha mounts at that time, the Earth visitors will basically be invincible in the world on this planet, and even be able to rush out of the atmosphere in one fell swoop and go to outer space for exploration. But Liang Yue doesn't want to do this, so they probably can only take the weapons and equipment from Earth to fight against the dinosaurs and other creatures here with the blessing of magic power, magic elements, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Many native creatures should also have many evolutionary roots that are different from the normal evolutionary laws of species living and developing in such a primitive planet that is about to move towards magic. Will probably not be easy for human beings on Earth. What do you think is the significance of the appearance of this planet to Earth? After returning to their respective rooms, Liang Yue was lying on the bed at this time, hugging Mileva on the left, Guna on the right, and Tina on his chest in the middle. Just as he was explaining some of the tricks and precautions in cultivation and meditation to the three girls around him, Tina, the little girl, suddenly asked him such a question. At least, it can alleviate the internal contradictions of the Earth to a certain extent, reduce wars, and solve the problems of insufficient development space and resources, right? Liang Yue smiled after hearing the words and replied. Chapter 867 Strategic Resources. Soon, 3 days passed in a flash. Liang Yue followed the previous agreement, reopened the space channel to Xander, and brought everyone back to the small broken building. Although the visitors were still somewhat unsatisfied, they didn't dwell on it too much. After all, each of them carried a mission, and following along to inspect this planet was just a small part of the journey. In addition, the news that Liang Yue had decided to open up this planet to Earth to a certain extent in the form of an academy had already spread among them during these 3 days. For these top scientists, observers, wealthy dignitaries from various countries, cultivating and strengthening their bodies was certainly important. But since there was already a fixed and reliable channel for cooperation, there was no need to rush. Moreover, cultivation is something that can't be rushed. The most urgent thing now was to return to Xander and complete the tasks assigned by their respective countries, and then try to obtain some preferential conditions from someone. Unfortunately, although Liang Yue understood their thoughts very well, he didn't leave these people any room for bargaining. After all, the entire planet belonged to him, and the property rights were all his, legitimate and legal, now recognized throughout the universe, so the decision was his to make. In contrast, the various countries on Earth basically had no bargaining chips to use against him. You should know that the technological level of the most advanced countries on Earth has not yet reached the stage of long-distance interstellar travel, and if they want to set foot on this planet, Liang Yue has to open the door and personally pick them up. Without this guy's guidance, it's unknown whether Earth can even observe this planet billions of light years away with a telescope. Compared to the others who were busy with cultivation and exploration during these 3 days, Liang Yue was not idle either. After all, he wanted to establish an academy on this planet. And whether it was the cultivation of the students or the scientific research and exploration, a stable environment was needed. In Liang Yue's vision, cultivation would be the mainstream, and the cultivation population would be the majority of the academy's personnel. Under this layout and planning, the main group of students would inevitably be young people, and perhaps a batch of soldiers could be added in addition to absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, magic power, and magical elements to nurture oneself. Experience is also an essential part of cultivation. Therefore, in order to take care of the strength and coping abilities of those new cultivators, Liang Yue also took the time in the previous 2 days to divide the distribution areas of creatures on this planet. The area near the Tree of Life and the Emerald Sapling is undoubtedly the best place for cultivation, and the academy will be built nearby. After all, the personnel composition within the academy will be very complex. Not only cultivators, but also some researchers and even their families may be here. Of course, as the true owner of the planet, he can't be too biased since he had decided to bring this planet into the branch of magical evolution. Then the other species on this planet would also be included in his observation and cultivation. Dinosaurs, insects, various bizarre and huge creatures, and even various plants that may mutate under the nurturing of spiritual energy and magic power, are all within this range. Moreover, since he was going to do it, he might as well do it thoroughly. Therefore, after setting up a safe zone sufficient for rest and recuperation for the academy, Liang Yue took action again and planted some emerald saplings on the various continents and mountain nodes of this planet as a source of spiritual energy for irrigation, and with the saplings as the center, several different gravity multiple coverage areas were set up around them, protecting the saplings while also screening some more magical evolutionary seeds through this simple and crude method. Soon, a month passed quickly. Liang Yue brought a group of travelers back to Earth on time, or rather, back to the small town farm in northwestern China. After a period of construction and operation, the surrounding area of the small town farm was now very different from before. Whether it was out of importance attached to the Xander travel project, or a series of planning and operation projects brought about by the gushing and diffusion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the Chinese side had sufficient reasons to work hard to manage this area under the combined effect of various factors. The originally barren northwest desert area of Lochner has naturally become a vibrant hot land, especially when Liang Yue took everyone back to Earth's outer space on the Dolphin, and then slowly descended to the ground. The elites from various countries in the spacecraft immediately noticed the changes here compared to when they left a month ago. This land in front of them seemed to have become more regular. The coverage area of green vegetation was even expanding several circles around Liang Yue's small town farm, and the two dense river networks, the originally intermittent transportation routes, had now all been connected, and a large number of aged trees had even been planted on both sides of the wide roads. Looking closely at the panoramic sand table of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, most of those beautifully trimmed and sturdy trees seemed to be fruit trees, and beside the fruit trees, the Chinese people didn't seem to have any intention of wasting the open space further away on both sides of the road. The originally yellow desert area seemed to have been completely covered with drip irrigation pipes, and green plants were densely planted, covering the mountains and fields from west to east. The coverage area had even followed the old shoreline of Lochner, extending in an arc from the northwest area where the small town farm was located, along the mountains and terrain, all the way to the east. Moreover, even the mountainous areas further north of Lochner, and even the mountain depressions and gullies, the Chinese side didn't seem to intend to let go at this time. A team of considerable size was using various equipment to drill holes, loosen the soil, and plant something on some hillside areas behind them. The group responsible for setting up the drip irrigation pipes was working together to drag plastic pipes laboriously up the slope. My God! They are really crazy in the team. A top sociologist from old Europe couldn't help but widen his eyes when he saw the scene on the sand table. Is it necessary? Although this place has solved the water source problem because of you, why rush like this? As time goes by, those mountains will get better by themselves in the future, won't they? Stark also felt a little incredible at this time, so he turned to look at Liang Yue and Meng Xiaoyu next to him with some puzzlement. Remember the emerald sapling I planted in the mountain village before? Liang Yue replied when he heard the words. Is that the one that can continuously gush out that spiritual energy of heaven and earth? Yes, I also planted one in my farm before. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth is a gentle and natural energy, and it is also a very scarce resource on earth. Humans, animals, insects, and plants can all use it naturally and without hindrance. Plants grown in an environment with spiritual energy will also be of better quality, especially those fruits and vegetables. They can deposit the absorbed surplus spiritual energy into beneficial substances in the body, which will have many benefits for people to eat. Moreover, there are basically no side effects, and the long-term use effect will be better, which is a good thing for cultivation or health preservation. The country obviously attaches great importance to this resource, just like your spiritual tea. Spiritual tea is a higher-level plant species, not on the same level as ordinary plants, but ordinary species. If they grow in an abundant spiritual environment for a long time, there is also a certain chance that benign mutations or sublimation in terms of species level will occur. No wonder. Oh hey, I heard that the products in your farm have already started selling recently. More developed cities in the country, provincial capitals basically have a sales location. Then are you interested in opening a few in New York or other cities in the United States? No interest. You know I don't lack money at all now. Chapter 868. Others consider them trash. Stark left, taking Pepper with him on Liang Yue's air transport in the cabin. They also took away a batch of fresh fruits and vegetables produced on the farm, along with spiritually rich meat, eggs, and milk. The others who came with them were similar, most of them taking their gains from this trip shortly after the dolphin landed, and eagerly flying back to their home countries on Liang Yue's air transport after sales service. However, there was also a small group of travelers who didn't leave. Only the second-hand, outdated alien technology products they brought back from Xander were sent back to their respective countries by the Airbus. They themselves stayed behind for the time being, not because they were greedy for something or had other ideas, but because the government agencies behind them had already gained the upper hand and obtained some authority in the planned construction around the small town farm, establishing temporary office spaces. And it seemed that these countries' government agencies attached great importance to this temporary residence. Presumably, as the surrounding architectural layout gradually improves, these foreign envoys will eventually be transferred to distant places, or simply be allowed to reside in nearby towns. Time flies, and 2 more days have passed in the blink of an eye, just as Liang Yue had predicted in his heart. The relevant parties couldn't wait to contact him. However, they didn't really send a formal negotiation team to negotiate with him, but instead contacted him in advance through Meng Xiaoyu. Again, what they wanted was naturally those technological products that Liang Yue had spent hundreds of millions of star dollars to buy at the auction as a nouveau riche who had just taken root on Xander. Although Liang Yue had accumulated a considerable fortune because of the spiritual tea, but in most cases, there is still a slight difference between being rich and having status. If you want to passively and naturally get an invitation to an auction that owns illegal goods such as auctioning life planets from certain institutions, you really need to pay a certain price. So, in order to successfully become a guest of honor at certain restricted auctions, during this period, Liang Yue spent a lot of money in people's virtual world. Throwing money around the sapling of the Tree of Life was the most satisfactory item he obtained during this period. But in addition to such native fantasy species, most of the brands are actually from the technology side. Moreover, technological products that are eligible to be auctioned basically have eye-catching characteristics. Either the efficacy is extraordinary and cannot be bought in the normal market, such as weapons, and even weapon production technology equipment, or the equipment is complete, covering a wide range, and after the goods arrive, they can be placed on the spot, basically forming an industrial chain for production and directly opening a factory. Liang Yue bought a lot of such goods this time. Most of them are basically stuck at the level of being 1 or 2 generations lower than the highest technology products of the same category on the local market of Xander, but they are invaluable to some races from backward civilizations. Liang Yue certainly doesn't need these things. After all, he has the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, and the technological development achievements in his hands have already exceeded the level of Xander. But for the countries of the earth, this is definitely a fatal temptation, especially when Liang Yue purchased these goods. There were many top expert teams from various countries providing advice by his side, intentionally or unintentionally, under their suggestions and instigation. The goods Liang Yue bought were basically very useful to the earth. Of course, Liang Yue himself didn't care about these. After all, he was just trying to spend money at the time. It didn't matter what he bought. Anyway, he basically reserved the entire venue. The people above are very interested in your planet and the batch of alien equipment and technology production lines you bought at the auction. Let's not talk about the college plan on that planet for now. They are still researching the specifics. It seems like they are discussing it quite intensely, and it's the serious kind. As for that batch of equipment, they want me to ask you first, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever thought about cooperating? In an orchard in the farm planting area, Liang Yue was walking next to a clear grape trellis. The thick branches were now full of fruit, and clusters of black-purple grapes were covered with fruit frost. Looking at the crystal clear, full grains, Meng Xiaoyu, who was holding a small notebook next to her, couldn't help but pick a small bunch and throw 2 into her mouth. The sweet and refreshing taste, as well as the abundant spiritual energy, immediately made her squint her eyes involuntarily. Not far away, Tina, Kuna, and Mirava each held a bunch of grapes in their hands. and were carefully teasing the two half-grown golden macaws on the grapevines. "I don't really care about that batch of equipment. As for cooperation, forget it." As he said that, Liang Yue waved his finger, and a list recording all the goods he had purchased from the Xander auction was immediately sent to Meng Xiao. "You let them pick 5 items that they are interested in, and I will throw the rest into the academy for research when the time comes." "Just like that? Don't you think it's a little too casual to handle it like this?" Hearing what he said, Meng Xiao was stunned, and then frowned and asked him, "These auction items brought from the auction are not only obsolete goods in Xander, but also not good enough in my place." Liang Yue replied casually upon seeing this. Just as he said before, the technological development in the Marvel world is very strange. Even those places that claim to be famous frontier civilization planets, the degree of scientific and technological development is actually not very dazzling. It's as if there is an invisible membrane blocking the way forward for these technological civilizations. Even after tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, they still remain within a certain limit. On the contrary, the Earth, although it belongs to a late developing and backward civilization, and the overall level is barely able to fly out of outer space, it can often inadvertently burst out some amazing technological achievements. For example, Dr. Pym's Pym particles, Stark's time travel machine, etc. As for the second, third, and fourth-rate technology equipment, weapons, and equipment that Liang Yue obtained at the auction, they are really far behind the technological research results of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu. Seeing his attitude, it seemed that he really didn't take these seriously. So Meng Xiao didn't say anything more. Instead, she began to discuss with him the number of items that China would choose in advance, implying that she wanted to get a few more pieces from him. After all, although Liang Yue doesn't like this batch of equipment, they are treasures that all countries on Earth are seeking but cannot obtain, and each one may trigger a reshuffle in a certain field. If they choose the right one, they might really bring about another technological revolution. Chapter 869 Planet Academy. The plan for the next trip to Xander remains unchanged, and the time is still set by Liang Yue to 3 months later. As before, however, after this trip ends, what awaits the countries of Earth will undoubtedly be a busier 3-month preparation period. After all, compared to going to Xander, experiencing a more advanced civilization system, conducting inspections and research, and incidentally picking up 1 or 2 outdated, cross-era technological items, going to Liang Yue's private planetary academy to study, cultivate, and do research seems to be equally important, and in a sense, even more tempting than going to Xander. In fact, as Liang Yue expected, when everyone returned to Earth and spread the news in their respective circles, it was like dropping a nuclear bomb among the elite groups of various countries. The fact that Liang Yue bought a living planet because he had too much star yuan accumulated and was eager to cash it out seemed to stun the entire ruling class on Earth at once. For a time, whether it was the United States, the world's most powerful country, Western Europe, a group of developed countries, Japan, which considers itself the leader of Asia, the universe's strongest South Bang nation, or the leadership of Samba and Wakanda, who were located in underdeveloped regions but unexpectedly received travel slots. They were all a little caught off guard by this sudden news. A living planet with a surface area more than 3 times that of Earth. It is in the late dinosaur era, rich in species, suitable for human survival. Only the oxygen content and planetary gravity are slightly higher than Earth. It is rich in resources, has a superior environment, is located at the forefront of an unfamiliar star field, has an important strategic position, and has unlimited potential and development value. In addition, the fact that the planet harbors a world-destroying gene virus specifically targeting humans, and that Liang Yue casually released tens of millions of mecha and warship combat units to defend the universe, cannot be concealed from anyone. In short, such a thing would be a groundbreaking event on Earth, although in essence, it has little to do with the various countries on Earth. However, after learning that Liang Yue had become the planet's owner and legitimately possessed a living planet with excellent conditions, some self-proclaimed upper-class people on Earth suddenly couldn't sit still. It concerns the development and future of mankind. Think about it, on today's Earth, so many countries are constantly erupting in conflicts, contradictions, and even wars because of small pieces of land, exclusive economic zones in the ocean, domestic asset losses, resource control by external capital, and uneven food distribution. Some people have actually directly taken over the full ownership of a living planet at an auction on an alien planet. Has humanity's new era of cosmic navigation quietly begun ahead of schedule? At first hearing, it's simply like something out of Arabian Nights. There's no way around it. The level of shock from this matter is like your childhood friend next door, who you stayed up all night playing games with last night, suddenly inherited $3 trillion in ancestral assets. The next morning the matter happened too suddenly and was a bit too magical. Even the elite members of the human group were unable to accept it for a while then. After the high-level officials of various countries really saw the itinerary and experiences recorded by their returning travelers on their wrist computers, they slowly began to calm down. Immediately afterwards, almost immediately, they began to summon their own country's high-level think tanks, scientific advisors in related fields, decision-making groups, and even many interest-related people who were close to them. They gathered together solemnly and began a fierce and detailed discussion at the same time. The state machine was running at high speed, and the analysts of relevant departments immediately launched a public relations campaign for someone. As a result, in the 3 to 5 days after Liang Yue returned to Earth, some phone calls began to come in one after another by agreement among them, naturally included Betty's father, Old Ross, Gwen's father, Old George, Aziz Prince from the Middle East, and even the butler who came with Elizabeth when she was about to enter the manor. Some people called in to express their thoughts directly to Liang Yue, relying on their personal identity advantages, wanting to ask for more quota shares in his Planet Academy plans. Some were conveying some requests for joining the game on behalf of certain people, or also wanting more quotas. More people actually don't have Liang Yue's contact information, or, even if they can get his phone number through some channels, they are worried about being too presumptuous. So they personally sent people to China and sent greeting cards in some form. In short, the temptation of Liang Yue's planet is great, and many people want to personally log in and fully feel the real charm of this second living space for human beings in the universe. Therefore, although it has only been less than a week since the return, in these few days, the visitors to Liang Yue's small-town farm have been absolutely endless, tireless, and annoying in comparison. China seems much calmer. This is not only because Meng Xianwu, the little secretary, has been by Liang Yue's side, and can help convey the opinions and decisions of relevant parties at any time, and the communication between the two parties is smooth and unimpeded. More importantly, it is because of Liang Yue's attitude on the matter of establishing an academy on his planet. Previously, when everyone was still traveling in Xander, the many elite groups from all over the world had already conducted a more formal, common-sense contact with Liang Yue on this matter. At that time, Liang Yue's attitude was very clear. In a word, the world is one, and China must exclusively occupy 90%. Translated, it means that in the academy on his planet, China will exclusively occupy 90% of the personnel quota, and the remaining 10% will be the share of various countries in the world. As soon as this attitude came out, it immediately caused huge controversy. Many elites from various world powers expressed their dissatisfaction to him on the spot. To be precise, except for China, travelers from other countries were actually very dissatisfied and expressed their opinions. Unfortunately, Liang Yue didn't care about their opinions at all, and directly made the rules dictatorially. Seeing that the opposition was ineffective and the matter was unfeasible, the others were naturally unwilling, but they did not entangle too much for the time being. Probably also felt that there should still be room for bargaining in this matter. So, several travelers whose national strength was insufficient turned to continue to lead the topic to the selection criteria of the academy staff. Since 90% of the staff is from your China, how should the remaining 10% be allocated? Is it still based on national strength or financial resources? In this regard, Liang Yue's answer was also very straightforward: evenly distributed among all countries in the world. All countries that are willing to enter his planetary academy for cultivation and study, or to engage in scientific research and exploration, can obtain the corresponding quota as long as they have the intention and need. The number of quotas is to be divided equally by 1/10 of the total number of quotas divided by the number of willing countries. It means that 90% of the quotas are for China, and the remaining 10% is to be divided equally by all other countries. As the saying goes, people are not afraid of scarcity, but of inequality anyway. Except for China, the other countries on Earth basically have no special meaning to Liang Yue. In this case, equal distribution is naturally the best solution. As for the specific number of people in the first batch of in-depth study plans to Liang Yue's Planet Academy, Liang Yue hopes that this number can be maintained at around 10,000. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 870: The Dropout Trio. I don't want to go to school anymore. Under the night sky, in the lush little city farm, after finishing an exquisite dinner, Glu Na, who was taking a stroll on the city wall to digest, suddenly changed her previous silence and turned to look at Liang Yue beside her. Hearing her words, Tina and Milova beside her also immediately turned their attention over. At this time, a week had passed since they returned from Xander. Although since the launch of the interstellar travel project, the three girls have become quite wealthy, quickly growing from little girls who couldn't even scrape together their college tuition and were about to be desperate, into successful women with amazing wealth accumulation. Moreover, because of the travel projects organized by their charitable foundation, they are already well known and the focus of attention. But essentially, as three students who have only been in school for less than a year, school after all still needs to be attended now. After returning, the three of them have been dawdling in the little city farm for a week, and Liang Yue plans to send them back to New York tomorrow to continue their studies. Then, probably 3 months later, when another trip starts, they will go to Xander with him again. Anyway, my current life focus is no longer at school, and through the previous 2 trips to Xander, I also found that most of the astronomical theories and knowledge points that the school teaches us are actually wrong. What I learn at school is not as much as what I learn in the virtual world of Xander. Feeling Liang Yue's gaze, Guna blinked her big eyes twice and continued to explain. The 2 girls beside her seemed to be influenced by her at this time, and also spoke. Indeed, if it's just pure learning, the efficiency in the virtual world is much higher than in reality. Moreover, since following you to the universe a few times, staying in school is indeed no longer necessary. After all, our current pace of life has become somewhat incompatible with it. It's not just that. Now going back to campus feels like a burden. Saying burden doesn't seem quite appropriate. We can only say that campus life is a bit far from our current life trajectory, and what we learn at school is basically useless in the foundation and in life. In addition, isn't your academy plan about to start? In the past few days, the 3 of us discussed it together. If possible, learning and using magic should be very interesting, since seeing that towering tree of life, the magnificent magic circle, and that little tree that can convert various energies into heaven and earth spiritual energy, I feel that we can never go back to the previous campus. In this way, the 3 girls at this time spoke to Liang Yue one after another, telling her their own thoughts. After mentioning words such as magic and cultivation, their delicate faces also began to become radiant. Unconsciously, it seems that compared to boring and tedious learning, rote memorization, and seemingly endless various calculation formulas, that kind of mysterious magic can attract their attention more. It doesn't matter if you drop out of school. Anyway, the money you have now can already support you, but I think New York University may not let you 3 excellent students leave so easily. Hearing their words, Liang Yue smiled and said the current Tina, Milova, and Guna are no longer just simple students, or even just rich people. The resources, connections, and even various possibilities with extremely high upper limits represented by the 3 little girls are a coveted resource for any organization and institution. Not to mention anything else, just in terms of knowledge content, the alien books, academic papers, and even planetary promotional manuscripts that the 3 girls helped New York University obtain from Xander have already exceeded the scope of general knowledge. Not to mention that the 3 girls now directly control the leadership of the precious interstellar travel quota. Look at China, Big Mao, and Second Mao at this time. For example, the extracurricular homework that New York University temporarily arranged for them when they learned that the 3 girls were about to go to Xander. This is just one of the most superficial methods. Do you mean that the school will prevent us from dropping out? Hearing this, Milova seemed a little unresponsive and quickly asked beside her, saying prevent is a bit inappropriate. The relationship between people, and between people and organizations, is not necessarily a black and white relationship. The school will definitely not have any confrontational disputes with you directly. They may use some other conditions to retain you, such as extra establishment employment or guest positions. The purpose is to maintain contact with you and then seize the opportunity to profit from it. This is not difficult to understand, Liang Yue roughly speculated and said with some banter. Then, do you have any suggestions for our plans? After being silent for a while, the 3 of them looked at each other, and then Guna continued to ask. No opinion. Learn magic or something if you want to, but this is not something that can be done overnight. It will involve a lot of your energy. You have to be mentally prepared, of course. We have already discussed it. In the future, the focus will be on cultivation. It's just that the foundation is a bit difficult to deal with. It's easy to say to help poor students or something. Hiring a professional team can handle it, but the problem is the quota for traveling to Xander. Once every 3 months, and each time the quota has to be drawn by us. How long do you plan to set sail once to your planet to cultivate? Although you can't come back at any time, at least there is a chance to go home to visit every year, right? At that time, Are you planning to use a spaceship to take the students to your planet? Don't take a boat. The distance between Earth and there is too far. Going there will waste at least half a year in the middle. I plan to build a space gate here in this way. Can we come back at any time? Theoretically, yes, but the necessary academy system is naturally indispensable, and at that time, not all students in the academy will cultivate. There should be many people doing research. The initial plan should be similar to the schools here on Earth, half a year per semester, and without special reasons, it will naturally not be allowed to easily pass through the portal if that's the case. Chapter 871 Talent Detector. Events unfolded just as Liang Yue had anticipated. New York University truly couldn't bear the thought of Tina and her two companions vanishing from their campus. Even though the three young ladies had spent relatively little time at the school previously, there was a fundamental difference between that and formally withdrawing or taking a leave of absence. Furthermore, many elites within the American education system were also unwilling to see these three influential women disappear from the domestic university scene altogether. They hoped to maintain some connection with the three, even if the hierarchical relationship of student and teacher, learner and educator, no longer existed. And so, under this shared understanding, New York University quickly provided a solution. A mere day after the three returned to campus, and only a dozen hours after they applied to the relevant departments to withdraw, a special case employment agreement, passed unanimously by the Board of Trustees, was freshly produced. Guna, Tina, and Maral, three young ladies who hadn't even had the chance to graduate from their freshman year, were thus specially invited to become visiting professors at New York University. Moreover, these positions came without any teaching or responsibilities. The rank and benefits were maximized, and there was no need to participate in various research projects or college activities. They only needed to show up a few times a year when they had the time, if they could incidentally bring back some benefits for their alma mater. For instance, various extraterrestrial books, spacefaring logs, research data on strange and unusual biological species, rare metal samples not found on Earth, analyses of cosmic astronomical phenomena, and other such materials would naturally be even more reliable. In short, the hope was that if these three special individuals gained any advantages in their future endeavors, they wouldn't forget that they had an alma mater silently supporting them. There was no expectation of bringing back anything overly precious. Some scraps of value that the three might not even consider important would suffice. The terms of this employment contract were so generous that even though Liang Yue had given the three girls a heads up beforehand, they still hesitated when the moment arrived. So, they specifically sent a video link back to seek someone's opinion. At the time, Liang Yue was in a meeting. It was a seminar on the specific structural planning of the Planetary Academy, its educational philosophy and guiding principles, and the student enrollment standards. In short, the nation attached great importance to his Planetary Academy project and had sent several people in advance to discuss the specific regulations of the academy with him. For example, if you want to recruit students to the academy and teach them cultivation, what are the basic requirements for these students, such as age and aptitude? After the academy officially opens, what kind of courses will the students be taught? Should there be distinctions in the specific content categories and cultivation systems? In addition, what are the regulations and specific standards for the recruitment of personnel for the academy's research system, another integral part of the academy? And should the research topics and projects of these personnel be systematically categorized? Things like that. In short, although Liang Yue was the initiator of this project, the owner of the academy, and even the planet's lord, the nation clearly valued it much more than he did. However, Liang Yue wasn't entirely unprepared when facing the inquiries from the experts present. After all, establishing a sect and teaching disciples was not the first time he had done such a thing. Even the civilization in the stronghold world, the Great Xia Kingdom, had many similar academy teaching institutions, even cultivator sects and family inheritance systems, in its past millennia of development. Then, by referring to the modern education system, the problem could be basically solved with the Xiao in charge of the academy's scientific research system. There were basically no difficulties. The main problem now facing Liang Yue and the nation was actually only one: the student admission standards. This is an instrument for aptitude testing, including multiple indicators such as spiritual roots, bone structure, and mental strength. Among them, spiritual root aptitude determines a person's prospects in immortal cultivation. Bone structure determines the cultivation efficiency in martial arts, and those with extraordinary mental strength can consider studying the magic system. Of course, this indicator is not absolute. The various cultivation systems only have some differences in the initial stages and methods of cultivation. In the end, they will probably tend to converge to the same destination, and there will even be many overlapping stages in the process. In addition, there seem to be many awakened individuals in this world, either because of bloodlines or because they have reached an understanding with certain other dimensions, or they have suddenly developed some ability due to some stimulus. These people are not orthodox cultivators, but their existence itself proves the diversity of supernatural energy. But frankly, I'm not very optimistic about the future of these suddenly awakened superpowered individuals. Perhaps some of them have decent abilities, but generally, they have little potential. Rather than saying this is an ability, it's more like a talent. But this group of people is not within the Academy's recruitment scope. You can take this aptitude testing instrument back and test some students on campus. I will send you the specific student talent standards later. As for age, it's best not to exceed 24 or 25 years old, and the educational level should be a high school diploma. As for whether they can be admitted, I will ultimately decide. There will also be some cultivation requirements for scientific research students, but the standards don't have to be as strict as for professional cultivators. Cultivation is actually a passively running human evolution mechanism. With the deepening of cultivation, various functions of the human body will continue to improve, including brain power and intelligence. So, my idea is that as long as the aptitude is qualified and they pass my screening, they can enter the academy for study and receive guidance. When the student's cultivation reaches a certain level, their future paths will be diverted, either full-time cultivation or part-time scientific research exploration. There is no need to divide the newly enrolled students into systems from the beginning. Perhaps they had deduced something from some previous signs. Although the content of the discussion with Liang Yue this time was very important, the personnel sent by the relevant parties to contact him were basically young people. Except for a kind-looking middle-aged woman in charge of leading the team, some were even younger than Meng Xianwei, looking only 17 or 18 years old, with pure and lovely faces, as if they were on an outing after receiving the spherical aptitude testing device sent by Liang Yue. They couldn't wait to start verifying their talents on the spot. The few people present had no objections to what he said anyway. These people were not the ones who would ultimately make the decision. This meeting, to put it bluntly, was just a liaison occasion for mutual communication. It didn't really matter whether it was held or not. Liang Yu's little secretary, Meng Xianwei, could have negotiated it with him. Therefore, Liang Yue had chosen a relatively quiet but drafty pavilion in his small-town farm as the venue for this so-called meeting. The leading middle-aged woman on the opposite side had set up a video recording device next to her at the beginning of the meeting, recording the content of the meeting in its entirety during the entire meeting. In addition to questions about the basic structure of the academy and the student enrollment standards, they only raised one additional request, that was to send an expedition team to Liang Yu's planet in advance to explore the situation before the academy was officially established. Chapter 872, 50,000 Alien Expeditionary Force. Quickly, a month passed by just like that. During this period, negotiations and tentative contacts like this occurred several times back and forth. Some rules regarding the planetary academy, and even the exploration and development of new life planets, as well as the bottom lines between each other, had been pretty much explored in these rounds of negotiations and discussions. During the process, as the absolute home field, and with a foreseeable future where the Huaxia side would account for 90% of the personnel heading to the new human planet, it was naturally the main force in these multiple discussions. However, as an important part of this alien expeditionary force, the remaining representative team, composed of joint personnel from various countries on Earth, was also unwilling to lag behind. In the past month, Western countries, which consider themselves civilized and developed, and Asian leaders such as the island and stick countries, have also sent many people to join the negotiation team between Huaxia and Liang Yue. After all, this is related to the development of the second, truly meaningful, place for humans to live and survive in the universe. The significance is great, and the prospects are limitless, especially since the publicly available information brought back by relevant personnel shows that the living conditions, resources, environment, and other factors of this fresh life planet seem to be much better than those of Earth. Although someone had been claiming that the planet was his private property and that he did not intend to use it as the so-called second human habitat for the Earth's population to reproduce and live on. However, his words did not seem to be taken seriously by other countries, relevant people, and classes on Earth. It is estimated that in the hearts of some people, they probably think that Liang Yue is alone and weak. Even with a few people around him, they are far from being able to support the task of developing such a planet. Even though the strength and military level he has shown have far exceeded any country on Earth, even if the military forces of multiple powerful countries on Earth are united, it is difficult to match him. But in their thinking logic, if a planet wants to develop and progress, people are the foundation, Liang Yue has her life planet, that's right, and his military strength is also strong, that's right, but the Earth also has an advantage that he does not have, that is, a sufficient number of human individuals, between the two sides. In the end, it is actually a relationship of equal cooperation. Liang Yue didn't want to comment on this point. In the past month of multiple discussions, an important indicator, built on the mutual understanding of both sides, has been clearly and formally established, that is the number issue, which is the most important and most concerned by many people. Liang Yue's life planet is a private planet. Even if he is now willing to take it out in the form of an academy and conduct a trial cooperation with the Earth, the two sides are still in a trial stage. It is indeed inappropriate to send too many people there at one time. After all, this is only the beginning of the cooperation between the Earth and Liang Yue, and maintaining a respect is good for everyone. But that life planet is not small after all. Just the surface area alone is more than 3 times that of the Earth. If there are too few people scattered in such a large area of primitive ecological environment, they will not be able to make any waves at all. Therefore, after negotiations between the two sides, it was finally decided that the number of personnel to be sent over in the first batch should be set at around 50,000. Among them, it should be mainly military operations, observation, exploration, existing scientific research personnel, and construction personnel with relevant qualifications from various countries. The number of students will not exceed 10% of these 50,000 people for the time being, and will be controlled below 5,000. After becoming familiar with the environment around the academy and being able to ensure the safety of non-combat personnel, subsequent negotiations and adjustments will be made accordingly. Of course, Liang Yue had no objection to this, just as the countries on Earth were thinking. His planet is large, and the conditions such as the environment and resources are very good, but it is just a bit too empty according to his previous vision. He planned to build it into a livable planet where humans and nature coexist harmoniously. Extraordinary humans, extraordinary dinosaurs, extraordinary demons, fish, birds, etc. Mixed and cohabited abundant heaven and earth spiritual energy, as well as elemental magic, etc., will provide sufficient evolutionary nutrients for the ethnic groups there, and after a few years, they may be able to evolve some magical species with considerable potential. Of course, although this is a harmonious concept, it does not mean that technology should be excluded after the people from Earth go there. Liang Yue will also provide them with some development information in this regard, but there will be no too advanced ones, and those with too much power and strength will also be restricted to promote a mixed, competitive, and interdependent development system of various ethnic groups on that planet. Such as the Daksha Kingdom in the Stronghold world, is his ultimate goal. However, whether this matter can be achieved in the end depends on the subsequent development. The students and even scientific researchers sent by various countries on Earth may not be willing to cooperate with him so simply. Liang Yue can probably guess what these people are thinking. In the past month, although the various parties have been in frequent contact, under repeated discussions and negotiations, although the control of some scales has been improving, this number of about 50,000 foreign planet dispatch groups is actually the only consensus reached between the two sides. Many national representatives, spokespersons, etc., have found him here, either individually or in groups, hoping to increase the number of their own places through back doors or other additional methods. After all, in their opinion, the quota allocation rules made by Liang Yue this time are too unbalanced, too unscientific, and too unharmonious. Huaxia monopolizes 90%. Even if it is too biased towards one's own motherland, it is a bit too much. For this reason, the countries on Earth have used all means, various bribes, catering to their preferences, moving them with emotion and reason, and even beauty tricks, have been used among them. Naturally, there are the two Anglo-Saxon countries, the United States and Britain, which have always regarded themselves as Liang Yue's father-in-law countries. Unfortunately, Liang Yue's attitude this time is very tough. Even with the face of Elizabeth and Betty, it won't work. In addition, Liang Yue also has his own set of selection criteria for the admission of students to his academy. To put it simply, everyone can discuss the number of places, but whether the people you send in the end are suitable is not up to you, especially for Huaxia, which accounts for 90% of the total number of places. Liang Yue naturally has a more stringent set of selection rules as for the remaining countries on Earth, which account for 10% of the number. He is too lazy to care too much. Chapter 873 Nascent Soul Level Formation. Of course, it's not like we'll completely ignore it. At the very least, these students you send over shouldn't have any criminal records, right? A month has passed. Unlike the bustling interactions and frequent summits between China and other countries on Earth, Liang Yu's side has been quite leisurely recently. He's hardly gone anywhere. Aside from taking a trip to the magic sanctum in the Himalayas to connect with the Ancient One, Dr. Strange, Wong, and other senior magic users, intending to hire some of them to teach at his planetary academy, he's mostly stayed on his small-town farm. In addition, he casually established a stable interstellar portal near the central avenue of his farm, which, in the eyes of China and other countries, should be considered a major event. Recently, people from various parties have been coming to Liang Yue, mainly to try and squeeze more quota spots from him and haggle over prices. The most frequent request has been for permission to go to the new planet for investigation and exploration through the portal. However, that is Liang Yu's private territory after all, so naturally not everyone is qualified to set foot on it. Those who are allowed to pass, at the very least, must be professional teams jointly formed by multiple countries, and the number of people cannot be too large. Those teams formed by private individuals, single organizations, or even a few well-informed consortia and groups, have been directly excluded by someone. The emergence of a true great world of cultivation, its overall cultivation atmosphere, systematic operation, complex and diverse levels of cultivation methods, and various cultivation resources are all a huge nourishment for them. For example, right now, Liang Yue has used the formation system knowledge from the mortal world to set up multiple layers of defense measures around the interstellar portal he established in his small-town farm anyway, since teacher Shizuka, Bao Yun, and the others went there to train. Various levels of cultivation techniques, alchemy, weapon refining, formation secrets, and so on have been increasing almost every day. The collection of cultivation books in the library tower of his base world has also increased several times because of this. In addition, Shizuka, Hinata, and the others have also been placing spirit stones, or like natural treasures, and other items in the treasure secret places that have fallen in their village. Various newly added spiritual medicines, herbs, spiritual fruits, etc., have already filled the planting towers in the village and extended into the wild. Even the Great Xia Kingdom in the base world, some organizations, families, and even the royal family that have close ties with Liang Yu's disciples have benefited a lot from this. Liang Yue wasn't really idle during his time on the small-town farm. At the very least, he personally set up the Guardian formation outside the teleportation array. The level of this formation is currently only a mid-level magic formation equivalent to the nascent soul stage in the cultivation realm, but it integrates the functions of guarding, defending against enemies, illusion, traps, and mental guidance. It can be regarded as a decent comprehensive formation in the mortal world. It is probably equivalent to the defensive formation used by nascent soul stage cultivators to protect their cave dwellings at this time. Liang Yue was sitting not far from this formation, half sitting and half lying in a rocking chair in a planting garden, holding a secret book of formation inheritance in his hand. Studying it carefully behind him was a tall forest composed of pear trees, orange trees, and other trees with strong branches, lush leaves, and a height of 7 or 8 meters to 10 meters. Under the nourishment of the abundant spiritual energy of the small town, in just 1 or 2 years, these fruit trees, which have been carefully selected by modern agricultural fruit garden technology, have grown to a state that may take hundreds or even hundreds of years to grow. Outside, the scene is truly lush with green trees, towering like canopies, and laden with fruit, covering the sky and the sun. However, these fruit trees and other things on the farm are not allowed to grow randomly. Many professionals, professional agricultural and forestry planting masters, and even simulated robots with relevant skills input have been pruning these fruit trees in the farm. Therefore, although the fruit forest in front of you looks tall, with strong branches and upright posture, when you walk in it and take a glance, you can still see a sense of beauty in each of these fruit trees. Under the cover of a large area of misty spiritual mist, it is like a finely carved work of art. Anyone who comes here would probably not believe that this small-town farm was still a barren land with no grass and rubble and sand everywhere more than a year ago. In fact, with the increasingly prominent effect of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and the increasingly in-depth research in this area by relevant national departments, Liang Yu's farm has now become a veritable treasure, not to mention the various types of planting gardens and functional buildings that are rapidly springing up outside the small town. Just inside the small town, the quota of personnel who were originally only responsible for helping with duty, guarding, and even doing various alien agricultural research has reached the point where they need to compete fiercely before they can take up their posts. The soldiers who were originally responsible for patrolling inside the small town and on the city walls have been replaced wave after wave. The research teams that were originally led by agricultural tutors out of curiosity about alien crops have now been directly replaced by a full team of tutors, and the worst assistants must be agricultural doctors then, in order to make their existence seem useful. The work of pruning tree branches in the orchard has now been taken away by these people for the most part. Walking on the farm, he can often see old people with white hair or gray hair, holding scissors in their hands, climbing ladders and crawling all over the trees. Liang Yue thinks that the reason why these people are rushing to come and help him do work on his farm is probably to come and retire. As of now, after more than half a year of research, those eminent monks and virtues from the Buddhist and Taoist families who were sent to his farm by the relevant national departments have also achieved considerable results through the study of previous classics and records. They have figured out many cultivation veins in Liang Yue. On the other hand, will give them a few pointers when he is in a good mood occasionally perhaps. It is precisely because of this incident that a cultivation craze that is only concentrated in a small group of people has unknowingly unfolded inside the small town farm, and those who practice are those researchers from the Buddhist and Taoist families, as well as those white-haired old professors, direct doctoral students, and even the soldiers patrolling the farm. Of course, they probably didn't expect before that Liang Yue would actually decide to directly run an alien academy, specifically to recruit students and prepare to teach the way of cultivation with the billions of dollars in activity funds in my hand. Do you have any investment ideas? Just as Liang Yue was studying the formation books, Meng Xiaolu, who had disappeared for most of the day, drove a small four-wheeled electric car silently. She sat down next to him, then poured herself a cup of spiritual tea and drank it all in one gulp, before flipping through her little martial arts clone and saying to him, "Money has long lost its meaning to me." "What's wrong? Did someone come to you with a request?" Hearing this woman's words, Liang Yue said without even raising his head, "Tisk, recently, isn't the real estate industry in our country looking quite sluggish? Some people don't know how, but they learned that I have a sum of money in my hand, and then they came to me not interested." Chapter 874, Buying Real Estate? Not interested. Upon hearing the words real estate, Liang Yue refused almost without thinking. Afterward, a strange feeling arose in his heart. The amount was already at a level that could be measured in centimeters, and he didn't value it much anymore, but even so, he couldn't just throw it into it, could he? Currently, China is probably on the downhill slope of a turning point. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that the real estate industry has begun to decline. Previously, with the vigorous development of this industry, it unconsciously absorbed most of the country's resources, funds, and even the deposits in the hands of the people. Its influence was far reaching and deeply ingrained. Many people have since lived a life of spending tomorrow's money today, having to move forward in debt. Then, they were forced to work hard, struggle, and desperately move forward. As a result, it also drove all walks of life to accelerate forward, and an internal driving force was generated, causing the entire country to advance rapidly. But in that situation, the grassroots people of the entire country were really being spurred on all the way. Thanks to this, in the past 10 years, China's national strength has become increasingly strong, and the development in all aspects has become better and better. However, no matter how prosperous an industry is, no matter how closely related it is to the lives of ordinary people, it is impossible to always maintain a momentum of being pumped with chicken blood. Now, things are bad. Too much chicken blood has been injected, the wallets of the people across the country have been emptied, concentrated here, and it has also hurt the people's strength, with a pressure so great that young people don't even dare to get married. Now, this industry is on the verge of collapse predictably, except for those provincial capitals, first-tier cities, and even higher-level municipalities directly under the central government and other large core areas. Other places will basically decline all the way, eventually returning to the normal development level of various regions. This is the general trend, and it is the kind that everyone is watching. The vast working class and grassroots people are now waiting eagerly at this time to let Liang Yue go against the trend and use his money to plug this hole. Going against the trend, and being thankless, he is not stupid. It was because of some unknown reasons that the epidemic didn't come. However, Meng Xiaolu on the opposite side seemed to have some different opinions on his judgment. "What are you thinking? This time, I'm not trying to trick you. Although the business that came to us this time is real estate, it's all high quality assets that will retain their value even if the current trend is downward. The reason they came to me this time is just that certain levels in our country don't want to see these high-quality assets end up in the hands of some fixed institutions, and they want to carry out diversified operations. However, this level of investment is beyond the reach of ordinary people, and your place is a good choice. After speaking, Meng Xiaoyu glanced at someone with a slightly disgusted look, took a fresh orange from the coffee table next to her, and began to eat it leisurely. And then, what? And then, after those assets are in my hands, what do they want to do? Tisk, can't you think of something good? Do you think that others come to you just to get something from you? Taking a step back, with such a large amount of cash flow in your hands, are you just going to leave it in the bank? A bunch of numbers, how can they be as solid as real assets? That's also true. The US dollar, to put it bluntly, is just a small piece of paper even in this Marvel integrated world he is in. The national strength of the United States is much stronger than in reality for some indescribable reason, but it still can't cover up a certain class printing money at will here. It is also a situation where the world has suffered from America for a long time, faced with the United States, which has an extraordinarily developed technology, endless black technologies, and is much stronger in terms of military strength, technological research and development, and all aspects of strength. Many non-Western countries and regions on Earth, and even Western countries, are a little out of breath even with Liang Yue's explicit or implicit assistance in recent years. The situation facing China is still dominated by a strategy of passive defense in the short term, because of the blessing of strong national power. Although the overissuance is serious, the credit of the US dollar is still strong, and it is the absolute world currency. But in Liang Yue's eyes, this is just a pile of paper. And the US dollars in his hand came too easily now that he can use them to exchange for real assets. It is indeed a good deal. However, for this transaction, China obviously has its own considerations among them. Although there is Meng Xiaoyu's statement about diversifying the industrial structure, in Liang Yue's speculation, the other party should want to establish a stable cooperative and allied relationship with him. In short, it is to strengthen contact and strengthen cause and effect. Originally, in the eyes of some people, Liang Yue's investment projects in China were already very large. For example, the gene therapy series industry operated by his sister Liu Yao, the virtual world cooperation project dominated by China, and even the air and space passenger transport industry that just started more than half a year ago and is now beginning to show results. But the problem is that Liang Yue is flying too fast. In the blink of an eye, he has jumped from a magical young man who originally only possessed some black technology fruits to the level of a planet owner. Moreover, his industries in China, although they look very large, with deep interest connections, Liang Yue himself doesn't seem to take them seriously at all. It's as if those epoch-making technology industries are not his own assets, except for occasionally giving some instructions when Meng Xiaoyu and others actively inquire. He basically doesn't control anything. He himself seems to be just an outsider, always watching the development of the situation, and he doesn't participate in asset and wealth management at all. Even this time, when Liang Yue returned to China to invest in the establishment of this small town farm, the huge amount of cash flow remitted to China did not draw even a trace of funds from these industries. It was all directly remitted from some unknown foreign accounts. This kind of wealth really makes people confused, and for a time, it also made some high-level people in China unable to figure out his attitude to say that he doesn't care about anything. Such a large industry in China is attracting attention, moving, and coveted by everyone in this world, with great connections. To say that he cares, Liang Yue himself doesn't take it seriously at all. Up to now, the massive amounts of funds earned through gene therapy, air and space passenger car projects, etc., have been lying quietly in the accounts of their respective groups, without moving at all, and increasing day by day. Except for the internal development and adjustment of the group, or when paying taxes, a part will be used. Those funds are just lying quietly in the bank. Even the huge cash flow of up to hundreds of millions of dollars obtained by Tina, Mileva, and Guna through space travel quotas. Someone simply dismissed it and gave it directly to them. This kind of detached attitude makes it impossible to understand what he wants to do. In addition, Liang Yue's elusive personal strength. Some people in China are really afraid that one day, he will disappear from everyone's eyes without anyone noticing, and then never appear again. Originally, this was nothing. After all, such a large industry, since you don't want it, the country will naturally help to take care of it. But now, isn't there another life planet? The environment there is superior, the resources are abundant, the surface area is more than 3 times that of the Earth, and in all aspects, Earthlings can directly move in with their bags. The interests involved in this are too great, and it is really difficult to give up. Moreover, in the hearts of some people, Since Liang Yue can buy a planet, he can buy a second, a third, or even more even, just relying on the strength and power he has currently shown. This guy doesn't even need to buy it directly, distribute a part of the tens of millions of combat forces, spread them out, or directly explore, or militarily occupy, various life planets, resource planets, etc., can almost be said to be inexhaustible and inexhaustible. In the process, it may not even be necessary to conflict with some powerful forces in the universe after all. His current life planet is located on the edge of a barren star field in the Milky Way that few people enter under this situation. Let go of your courage and just let go and explore. In comparison, the domestic real estate industry is really nothing. Chapter 875 The Great Evolution of Global Species. And just like that, Liang Yue, this fellow, also fell into the pit of the domestic real estate industry, entering this industry on a large scale during a period when it was already clearly declining and heading downhill. Fortunately, as Meng Xiaoyu said, although the current environment is sluggish, the projects she introduced were indeed good. Basically, they were all high-quality projects in provincial capital-level first-tier cities, and even municipalities directly under the central government. At the very least, they were in densely populated areas with good development prospects and potential. Therefore, Liang Yue once again waved his hand and had Xiaoyu, the intelligent brain, transfer a sum of money from abroad, rounding it up to 2 trillion RMB, and directly allocated it to Meng Xiaoyu, preparing for a large-scale entry. However, even with such a large sum of money being thrown down, Liang Yue didn't have any intention of taking strong action or to making a big splash at Liang Yue's current level. He naturally doesn't value money much anymore, but he does have a lot of funds at his disposal. Since that's the case, he might as well use it to seek some benefits for those in need. Therefore, after allocating the money to Meng Xiaoyu, Liang Yue also stated directly that most of the housing assets purchased would be used to renovate and rent out as lower-end housing. Those shopping malls, office buildings, etc., will also be rented out at affordable prices. Of course, this idea of his was just an idea. The specific planning, renovation plan tasks, and so on, would ultimately fall on Meng Xiaoyu, Sister Lu Yao, and the professional teams, and even the intelligent brain, Xiaoyu. Time flies, and another half-month has passed in the blink of an eye. The several inspection teams that were granted permission by Liang Yue to enter his planet through the teleportation array have now begun to return one after another, although he didn't provide too much additional assistance to these exploration personnel. For example, space passenger cars, high-tech mech bodies, and other transportation and escort tools. The teams basically used some scientific research equipment that they brought from Earth, such as various energy detectors, observation instruments, soil testing tools, and even self-defense firearms, anesthetics, capture nets, and unmanned observation aircraft. Therefore, although the time these teams spent landing on that life planet was not short, with the longer ones being a month or so, and the shorter ones being more than half a month, the actual range of investigation and exploration was not much. According to feedback and detection from the intelligent brain, Xiaoyu, after passing through the teleportation portal, those people basically stayed within the safe zone. The objects and subjects of observation and research were mostly focused on the Tree of Life, which was several thousand meters tall and rose directly from the ground. Fortunately, Xiaoyu, the intelligent brain, hasn't been idle lately and has already made a comprehensive and secretive technological layout on his life planet. Various real-time coverage satellites, nano-level hidden cameras, and so on, have already been systematically established thanks to the quantum network that already covers the entire planet. Even if the several scientific expedition teams don't leave their homes, if we're talking about gains, they are still quite substantial. Coincidentally, although the teams that landed on the life planet with Liang Yue's permission this time came from different countries and forces, but after landing, after an initial period of adaptation, these inspection teams almost unanimously divided their teams into 3 parts. First, and most importantly, some experts and scholars have focused their research efforts on the Tree of Life, whether it is the elemental power that has turned into a rainbow of light, constantly radiating in all directions, or the magic aura surrounding the trunk of the tree. Even the characteristics mentioned in the auction materials, such as the places covered by the roots of the Tree of Life becoming the most fertile soil, are all topics with considerable research value. Secondly, another part of the team, botanists and zoologists, are observing the biological conditions in various parts of the planet through those hidden cameras that are almost all over the planet, searching for various rare species that exist in this late stage of the dinosaur era, exploring an unfamiliar, Primitive life planet is itself a huge topic, and the plants and animals are undoubtedly the most representative and complex things among them. Think about the plants and animals on Earth. Even now, scientists and explorers have not been able to fully identify and analyze them clearly, the value contained within. Just thinking about those special compounds, enzymes, etc. that may be contained in plant bodies, if you're lucky, if these substances can have an effect on some intractable diseases in the human body, it will directly develop a huge treasure. In this primitive life planet in front of us, in addition to various strange plants and animals that need to be developed and explored, Liang Yue also planted the tree of life and the emerald green little tree in it, injecting magical power, elemental power, heaven and earth spiritual energy, and other supernatural substances into it, making the overall living environment of the planet directly transform from an ordinary life planet to an extraordinary one. A foreseeable, global biological species evolution is already quietly taking place, the research value of which is absolutely unimaginable for ordinary people. In addition, these inspection teams also separated a third group of people. Most of these personnel are top-level guards and observers from various countries. Their existence was originally to protect the experts in the team and ensure the smooth progress of the inspection project, but Liang Yue had already divided the biological distribution range of his entire planet. Now that everyone is in the safe zone, the guard mission has naturally become less important, so, after some discussion within their respective teams, this third group of people changed from the original guard team to hunters and collectors. Naturally, they are also carrying many materials collected from that life planet, including soil, water sources, plant seedlings, strangely shaped fruits, small animals, unfamiliar insects, various plant leaves, extracts, and even small pieces of roots and stems. It can be described as diverse and varied. However, for safety reasons, China has not allowed them to take these samples away. Instead, after tense negotiations, a building was designated in the functional building opposite the Xiaochang farm. Across the wide spaceport, a little further away, specifically for scientific research purposes. The purpose, of course, is to prevent the invasion of some unknown bacteria, viruses, and inconspicuous alien species. At least that's the official explanation, but in secret, if any new results are really researched, it will naturally be impossible to hide it from China, the host. If necessary, some additional measures can even be used to restrict and even cut off the flow. The benefits of being the host are initially highlighted. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.